Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the most soul-crushing routines in American industrial history. A typical day working in a 19th century Boston textile factory. Picture this. It's 1850-something. You're a young woman who thought city work might be better than farm life, and you're about to discover that better is a very relative term. The air smells like machine oil and unwashed bodies. The noise will permanently damage your hearing, and your weekly wages wouldn't cover a decent meal at a modern fast food joint. You probably won't survive this shift without questioning every life choice that brought you here, but hey, at least you're not churning butter in rural Massachusetts, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how many of you are scattered across time zones, using history to drift off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The darkness is absolute when you jolt awake, and for one blissful half-second you forget where you are. Then reality crashes down with the weight of the two bodies pressed against you in the narrow bed. Mary on your left, snoring softly through her perpetually congested nose, and Sarah on your right, her elbow digging into your ribs like it does every single morning. The room is freezing. Not, oh, it's a bit chilly cold, but the kind of bone-deep New England winter cold that makes your lungs ache with each breath. You crack one eye open and see nothing. The boarding house window is a barely lighter rectangle in the blackness, revealing exactly zero helpful information about what ungodly hour it currently is. But your body knows. Your exhausted, aching 23-year-old body that feels 40 knows it's 4:30 in the morning because it's always 4:30 in the morning when consciousness returns to torment you. Somewhere downstairs, Mrs. Donnelly, your landlady, and the woman who definitely sold her soul for the ability to wake at 4 a.m. cheerful, is clanging a metal spoon against a pot. It's her signature alarm clock, more reliable than any rooster and twice as irritating. The sound echoes up through the thin wooden floors of this converted townhouse that now sleeps 43 mill girls in spaces meant for maybe 12 people. Maximum. You share this particular bed with two others out of economic necessity, not preference. The going rate for a boarding house bed in 1855 Boston is about $1.25 per week, which represents half your factory wages. Splitting a bed 3 ways cuts that to roughly 40 cents each, still a brutal expense, but slightly less brutal than the alternative. Historians still argue whether this arrangement was exploitative profiteering or simply the market reality of housing an exploding urban workforce, but from where you're lying sandwiched between two equally miserable souls, the distinction feels academic. The quilt covering all three of you is thin, patched in 17 places you've personally counted during insomnia episodes, and radiates exactly zero warmth. Beneath you, the straw mattress has compacted into something resembling lumpy concrete, and you can feel individual wooden bed slats through the fabric. There's a quirky historical detail that nobody mentions in the romantic millgirl narratives. These boarding houses almost never provided chamber pots in the sleeping rooms, so if nature calls, and it always does when you're this cold, you have 3 options. Brave the frigid hallway to the communal privy, use the bucket in the corner, mortifying, or hold it for the next 2 hours. You choose suffering. Sarah stirs beside you, muttering something incomprehensible. She's 17, fresh from a farm in Lowell, and she still cries quietly into her pillow most nights. You pretend not to hear because what comfort could you possibly offer? Don't worry, it only gets worse. Mary on your other side works the spinning room and has the calloused, cut-up hands to prove it. She's been at the mill for 6 years, which in factory terms makes her ancient, though she's only 25. The mathematical reality here is grim. Most mill girls last 3 to 5 years before their health forces them out, they get married, or they simply break. The room you're crammed into measures maybe 12 feet by 10 feet, and houses 6 women in 2 beds. Your trunk, containing literally everything you own, sits at the foot of the bed, serving double duty as a step stool. The walls are bare plaster, water-stained in the corners where winter condensation pools. There's one small mirror, perpetually fought over, and a single oil lamp that Mrs. Donnelly strictly rations to 30 minutes of light per evening. The whole room smells like unwashed wool, stale breath, and the faint chemical tang that clings to everyone who works with cotton all day. a smell you've stopped noticing on yourself but can still detect on the newer girls. You peel yourself out of the shared bed with all the grace of a corpse reanimating, and the cold hits you like a physical slap. The wooden floor is ice against your bare feet as you fumble in the darkness for your clothes. The same dress you wore yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. It's a simple cotton work dress in a muddy brown colour that hides stains beautifully, which is fortunate because laundry happens approximately once every 2 weeks if you're lucky, and can afford Mrs. Donnelly's washing service. You layer on your underlinen, the dress, a wool shawl that's seen better decades, and your stockings, one with a hole at the heel that you've been meaning to darn for 3 weeks. Your fingers are clumsy with cold and sleep deprivation as you lace your boots, the leather cracked and salt-stained from countless trudges, through Boston's winter slush. Around you, the other women are executing the same grim choreography, bumping into each other in the darkness, muttering apologies and curses in equal measure. The hallway outside your room is somehow even colder than the bedroom, if that's physically possible. 23 other mill girls are pouring out of their rooms like zombies in a period drama. Faces pale and eyes hollow in the dim glow of the single lamp Mrs. Donnelly has grudgingly lit at the base of the stairs. Nobody speaks much. What is there to say at 4:45 in the morning that hasn't already been said 1,000 times? You skip breakfast because Mrs. Donnelly's morning offering, watery porridge and stale bread, costs an extra nickel, and you're saving every cent for, well, you're not entirely sure what you're saving for anymore. Freedom maybe, a different life, a fantasy where you don't wake up at 4:30 a.m. 6 days a week, the impossible dream of owning a hat that isn't second-hand. The front door opens and the winter air rushes in like an invading army. It's still completely dark outside. The sun won't even consider rising for another 2 hours. You step out onto Merrimack Street and immediately your boots sink into a delightful mixture of mud, horse manure and semi-frozen slush that defines Boston's street maintenance in the 1850s. The city's infrastructure is absolutely not equipped for the explosive population growth the textile boom has triggered, and the evidence is literally everywhere you step. Gas lamps cast weak yellowish pools of light every 30 feet or so, creating more shadows than actual illumination. The effect is less charming Victorian streetscape and more perfect setting for cholera and crime. You join the river of humanity flowing toward the mill district. Hundreds of workers, maybe thousands, all trudging in the same direction like the world's most depressing parade. The sound of boots on cobblestones and wooden walkways creates a rhythm. Shuffle, splash, shuffle, splash. Men in rough work clothes overtake you, walking faster, probably headed to the docks or construction sites. Other women surround you, mill girls all, identifiable by the particular exhaustion etched into their faces. Some are immigrants, Irish mostly, speaking in lilting accents about things you can't quite make out. Others are farm girls like you, Yankees from rural Massachusetts and New Hampshire, who answered those newspaper advertisements promising respectable employment and moral supervision. The ads failed to mention the part about losing your hearing and developing a permanent cough, but such is marketing. Historians still argue whether the Lowell Mill Girl system, which promised education, culture and uplift, was genuinely progressive or just brilliant propaganda to make factory work seem appealing to respectable women. From your current position, ankle-deep in Boston street muck, you're leaning heavily toward the propaganda, interpretation. The street is alive with pre-dawn commerce. A baker's boy rushes past carrying a wooden tray of rolls, the yeasty smell making your empty stomach clench. A milk cart rattles by, the driver asleep at the reins while his horse navigates by memory. Someone is emptying a chamber pot from a third-story window. You dodge just in time, because apparently even at 5 a.m., Boston's sanitation is aspirational at best. There's a quirky detail that rarely makes it into history books. Most working-class Bostonians in this era never bathed fully more than once a month, if that. The combination of cold water, no indoor plumbing, and exhaustion meant that everyone simply existed in a perpetual state of uncleanliness. You've stopped noticing your own smell, but the collective aroma of hundreds of unwashed workers in winter wool is something special. The mill district looms ahead, and you can already see it. The massive brick building rising 6 stories high, windows glowing with lamplight like the eyes of some industrial monster. It's beautiful in a terrible way, this monument to progress and profit. Steam rises from vents in the roof, creating ghostly columns in the frigid air. The building is heated, which sounds nice until you realise they keep it at 90 degrees, because hot, humid air keeps the cotton threads from breaking. The temperature differential between outside and inside will make you dizzy. Other mills flank it. Boston's Fort Point Channel district is absolutely packed with textile factories, each one belching smoke and steam, each one consuming hundreds of workers per shift. The Charles River flows nearby, providing water power for the machinery, and also serving as a convenient dumping ground for industrial waste. The smell is industrial and organic all at once: coal smoke, machine oil, cotton dust, and river rot. You're 10 minutes from the gates now, and your pace unconsciously quickens along with everyone else's. The bell will ring at 5 a.m. sharp, and if you're not through those gates and at your station by 5:15, you'll be locked out and lose a quarter day's wages. The bell hits you like a physical force. It's not a pleasant church bell or a gentle chime. This is an industrial-grade brass monster mounted on the factory roof, and when it rings at precisely 5 a.m., the sound reverberates through your chest cavity and rattles your teeth. The noise echoes off every brick building in the district, creating a cascading effect that probably wakes people 3 miles away. If there's a more aggressive way to start a workday, you haven't encountered it. The bell serves a dual purpose: summoning workers and reminding everyone in earshot that the machines of progress wait for no one, especially not you. The human flood surges forward. You're caught in the current now, swept along with hundreds of other workers, all converging on the same massive wooden gates. The gates themselves are 12 feet tall and reinforced with iron bands, which seems excessive until you remember that these factories represent significant capital investment, and Boston has a thriving problem with theft. The message is clear: the machinery inside is valuable, you are replaceable. A gatekeeper stands at the entrance, a middle-aged man with mutton chops and a permanent scowl, holding a large pocket watch like it's the Holy Grail. His job is brutally simple. Once that watch reads 5:15, the gates close, and whoever's still outside loses wages. He doesn't care about your excuse. He doesn't care that you slipped on ice, or that Mrs. Donnelly's clock was slow, or that you have a perfect attendance record. Late is late, and the factory runs on precision timing that would make a German train conductor weep with joy. You shuffle through with maybe 2 minutes to spare, and the relief is real. Quarter-day wage losses add up devastatingly fast when you're earning roughly $250 per week. Your annual income, if you somehow never miss a day, hovers around $130, which sounds almost reasonable until you remember that everything costs money, and you're sending at least half of it back to your family's failing farm in rural Massachusetts. The math of poverty is relentless. Inside the gates, you're in a courtyard of sorts. A large cobblestoned area surrounded on 3 sides by the factory building's imposing brick walls. The architecture is industrial Georgian, if such a style exists. Functional, massive, completely unconcerned with beauty. Windows march in regimented rows up all 6 floors, each one identical to the last. Smoke pours from multiple chimneys, and you can already hear the machinery starting up. A low rumble that you feel in your bones before you consciously hear it. The courtyard is chaos. Workers are streaming toward different entrances depending on which floor and which room they're assigned to. Spinners head left, weavers straight ahead, doffers, the children who replace empty bobbins, scatter to various stairwells like small underpaid ants. Overseers stand at strategic positions watching, always watching. Their presence a reminder that this is not a collaborative workplace but a hierarchy where you occupy the bottom rung. A quirky historical detail that rarely gets mentioned. Many New England textile factories in the 1850s employed clock watchers, workers whose entire job was to synchronize all the factory clocks to ensure uniform timekeeping across the operation. The industrial obsession with temporal precision was relatively new, and factory owners understood that controlling time meant controlling labor. Before factories, most people worked by the sun and the seasons. Now you work by the minute, and every minute is accounted for. You catch sight of Agnes from the next boarding house over, and she gives you a tired wave. She works the carding room, which is somehow even worse than weaving. The air is so thick with cotton fibres that workers literally cough up wads of the stuff. She's been at the mill for 8 months, and has already developed the telltale factory cough that never quite goes away. Historians still argue whether mill owners genuinely didn't understand the health hazards of cotton dust exposure, or simply didn't care enough to address it, but either way, your lungs are the ones paying the price. The smell inside the courtyard is distinctive. Coal smoke, machine oil, cotton, and unwashed humanity all blending into an aroma that will cling to your clothes, your hair, and your skin no matter how much you try to wash it away. You've noticed that people can identify mill workers on the street just by the smell. It's not exactly a badge of honour. Someone bumps into you from behind, muttering an apology. It's one of the Irish girls, Bridget maybe, rushing toward the spinning room entrance. The Irish workers occupy an interesting position in the factory hierarchy. They're paid even less than Yankee farm girls like you, often assigned the worst jobs, and subjected to casual prejudice from both management and other workers. The "No Irish Need Apply" signs haven't made it to factory hiring yet, mainly because factories need bodies and can't afford to discriminate, but the pay scale certainly reflects ethnic hierarchies. It's ugly, and you're uncomfortably aware that your own marginal position above Irish workers is one of the few things that makes your situation feel less desperate. The second bell rings, 5:10 a.m. This is your 5-minute warning. Everyone's pace shifts from hurried to frantic. You break into an awkward half-jog toward the main weaving room entrance, your boots slapping against wet cobblestones. Other women are running too, skirts hiked up just enough to avoid tripping, shawls flying behind them like capes in the world's least heroic superhero origin story. You reach the door, grab the iron handle and yank it open. The noise from inside rolls out like a wave, the sound of hundreds of machines already warming up, already demanding your attention. The heat hits you next. That wall of humid warmth that makes your skin immediately start sweating despite the fact that you were literally freezing 30 seconds ago. One more bell will ring at 5:15. The final bell, the point of no return. You need to be at your loom, ready to work before that sound echoes through the building. You step inside and the door closes behind you with a heavy thud that sounds disturbingly like a prison cell locking. The stairwell is narrow, wooden, and currently packed with approximately 40 women all trying to ascend at the same time while maintaining some semblance of order. It's not going well. The stairs themselves are worn smooth in the centres from thousands of boots climbing and descending 6 days a week, creating treacherous little divots that are perfect for catching your heel if you're not careful. The wood creaks ominously under the collective weight, and you've heard stories, probably exaggerated, hopefully exaggerated, about staircases collapsing in other mills. Nothing motivates a climb quite like the fear of plummeting through rotten wood. You grab the railing, which is slick with the accumulated hand grease of countless workers, and start hauling yourself upward. First floor, second floor, the weaving room is on the 4th floor, which means you have 72 steps to climb. You know this because you counted them during your first week, back when you still had the energy for such frivolous activities as numerical curiosity. Now you just climb and try not to think about how your legs are already protesting, and you haven't even started your actual work yet. The air in the stairwell is thick, not quite as suffocating as it will be in the weaving room, but getting there. Cotton dust hangs suspended in the weak lamplight filtering from above, creating visible clouds that swirl with every movement. You can taste it on your tongue, feel it coating the inside of your nose and throat. This is the stuff that will eventually kill you, or at least seriously maim your respiratory system, but that's a future problem. Right now, your present problem is getting up these stairs before the 5:15 bell. Someone ahead of you coughs, a deep, rattling sound that speaks to months or years of inhaling this particulate nightmare. The factory cough is so common that it's basically the unofficial mill worker theme song. Some girls cough delicately into handkerchiefs, others just hack away without ceremony, occasionally spitting over the railing into the stairwell below, because why pretend at refinement when you're climbing to your doom at 5 a.m? Second floor is the spinning room, and as you pass the landing you catch a glimpse through the open door of rows and rows of spinning frames already in motion, tended by women who look exactly as exhausted as you feel. The noise from that room alone is substantial, a higher-pitched whir compared to the deeper thrum of the looms you're headed toward. A small child, maybe 8 years old, darts past you going down, a doffer who's already been dismissed from wherever she was stationed. Child labour is absolutely standard practice here, and while some reformers are starting to make noise about it being potentially problematic, the mill owners have a compelling counter-argument. Poverty doesn't care about your moral qualms, and families need every cent those children can earn. Third floor, and your legs are burning now. You're not out of shape. Farm life kept you plenty active. But standing motionless at a loom for 14 hours creates a very specific kind of physical degradation that doesn't translate to stair-climbing stamina. The woman in front of you is breathing hard, and the woman behind you actually stumbles, grabbing your shoulder for balance and nearly taking both of you down. You catch yourself on the railing, she mutters a breathless apology, and the human chain continues upward. Historians still argue whether the multi-story factory design was primarily about maximizing water power efficiency, or about concentrating workers in a way that facilitated supervision and control. But from your current position, somewhere between the third and fourth floor, sweating despite the cold, cotton dust coating your lungs, you're inclined to think it's all about making your life specifically worse. Fourth floor landing, finally. You emerge into a hallway that's dimmer than the stairwell, lit by oil lamps spaced too far apart to actually provide adequate light. The weaving room entrance is ahead, a set of double doors that are propped open, and the noise pouring through is already substantial. You can hear the looms, hundreds of them, clattering away in a rhythmic cacophony that will define every waking moment of your next 14 hours. A quirky detail that doesn't make it into the romantic industrial narratives. The wooden floors in these factories are deliberately left unfinished and rough, not because of cost-cutting, but because smooth floors would be dangerously slippery, given the combination of machine oil, cotton dust, and general moisture in the air. So instead, you walk on splintery planks that catch at your skirts and create their own hazards. It's a perfect metaphor for factory life. Every solution creates new problems. You pause at the doorway for just a second, steeling yourself. The weaving room is vast. It stretches the entire length of the building, maybe 300 feet, and it's packed with machinery in tight rows. The ceiling is maybe 12 feet high, crisscrossed with leather belts and wooden shafts that transfer power from the main water wheel to individual looms. Gas lamps hang at intervals, their light struggling against the perpetual haze of cotton fibres that float through the air like the world's itchiest snow. The heat is immediate and oppressive. They keep the room at around 90 degrees Fahrenheit because cotton thread breaks more easily in dry air, so humidity and warmth are maintained at levels that would make a greenhouse gardener comfortable and everyone else miserable. You're still wearing your wool shawl and heavy dress, and you can already feel sweat starting to form under your arms and down your back. You'll shed the shawl in about 30 seconds, but the dress stays on. The last time someone suggested wearing lighter clothing, the overseer made it very clear that moral standards must be maintained even at the expense of physical comfort. 200 looms fill this space, arranged in rows with narrow walking aisles between them. Each loom is about 6 feet wide and 4 feet deep, a mechanical beast of wood and metal and leather that will consume your attention completely for the next 14 hours. Women are already stationed at their machines, the early arrivers, the ones who came in at 4:45 to gain favour with the overseer or to get a head start on their quota. You're not one of those women. You arrive with precisely enough time to not get fined, and that's its own small rebellion. Your loom is in the third row from the windows, station number 47. You've worked this same loom for 8 months now, and you know its particular quirks and temperamental behaviours better than you know some of your relatives. You navigate the narrow aisle, squeezing past other workers who are already in motion, and arrive at your station just as the 5:15 bell begins its aggressive clanging. Right on time, always right on time, never early enough to be praised, never late enough to be punished. It's the narrow path of survival, and you walk it every single day. The bell's echo is still reverberating through the room when you drop your shawl onto the small wooden stool beside your loom, the only place you're allowed to sit, and only when the machinery is stopped for threading or repairs, which is approximately never. Your loom is already humming with potential energy, connected via overhead belt to the main drive shaft that runs the length of the ceiling. That shaft is currently spinning, powered by the water wheel 4 floors below, waiting only for you to engage your individual machine and join the mechanical symphony. But first, the bobbins. Always the bobbins. You reach into the wooden bin beside your station and pull out a fresh bobbin, a small wooden cylinder wound tight with white cotton thread. The thread quality varies wildly depending on which spinning room it came from and which spinner was having a good or terrible day. This particular bobbin looks decent. The thread evenly wound, no obvious thick spots or breaks. That's a small mercy because a bad bobbin means constant thread breaks, and thread breaks mean stopping the loom, fixing the problem, and falling behind on your quota while the overseer glares at you like you've personally insulted his ancestors. The shuttle sits in front of you, a wooden torpedo-shaped device about 12 inches long that will carry the bobbin back and forth across the loom, weaving the horizontal threads through the vertical ones at absolutely punishing speed. You open the shuttle's small metal clasp, remove yesterday's depleted bobbin, and slide the new one into place. The bobbin has to sit just right, with the thread feeding smoothly through the eye of the shuttle, or everything goes wrong immediately. You've done this approximately 7,000 times, so your fingers work on autopilot, checking the tension, making sure nothing's catching or twisting. The vertical threads, the warp, are already in place, stretched taut across the loom's frame like a giant harp from hell. There are literally hundreds of them, each one threaded through metal heddles that will lift and lower in precise patterns to create the fabric weave. Setting up a new warp takes hours and is done by specialist workers, thank God, because if you had to do that on top of everything else, you'd simply lie down on the factory floor and wait for death. Your job is maintaining the existing warp, which means watching for breaks and tying them back together when they snap, which they do constantly, because cotton thread is simultaneously your livelihood and your nemesis. You check the warp threads closest to you, running your fingers lightly across them to feel for any that seem weak or frayed. 2 threads in the middle section feel suspicious, thinner than the others, probably stretched from yesterday's tension. You make a mental note to watch those carefully. When they break, not if, when, you'll have maybe 30 seconds to stop the loom, tie the ends back together in a weaver's knot and restart before the overseer notices and starts calculating how much production time you've wasted. The loom itself is a magnificent piece of engineering that you've grown to hate. With the passion of 1,000 suns, it's a power loom, meaning it's mechanically driven rather than hand-operated, which sounds like progress until you realize that progress in this context means the machine sets the pace and you simply try to keep up or get maimed. The frame is heavy oak and iron, built to withstand constant vibration and stress. The moving parts are numerous and mostly unguarded because apparently safety features cut into profit margins. Historians still argue whether the transition from hand looms to power looms represented genuine technological advancement or just a mechanism for de-skilling craft workers and maximizing owner profits. But from your position, standing in front of a machine that could easily remove your fingers, your hand, or your entire arm if you make one wrong move, you're pretty firmly in the "this benefits literally everyone except me" camp. You engage the drive belt. There's a lever at the side of your loom, and when you pull it, a leather belt overhead shifts position, connecting your loom's main shaft to the constantly spinning drive shaft above. The loom shudders to life with a clatter that makes your teeth hurt. The heddles start their up-down rhythm. The shuttle races back and forth through the opening warp threads with a bang, bang, bang that will continue for the next 14 hours, and the reed, a comb-like device that packs the horizontal threads tight, slams forward with each pass in a motion that's hypnotic and headache-inducing all at once. The noise is immediate and total. Your loom alone produces maybe 80 decibels of racket. Multiply that by 200 looms all running, simultaneously, and you're in an acoustic environment that makes conversation literally impossible and hearing damage absolutely guaranteed. There's a quirky historical detail here. Many veteran mill workers developed their own form of lip reading and hand signals to communicate over the machinery noise. It's not sign language exactly, more like a desperate evolution of gesture and exaggerated mouth movements that let you convey, "my thread broke," or "overseer coming," without screaming yourself hoarse. You watch the shuttle make its first few passes, checking that everything's feeding smoothly. The fabric, cotton sheeting in plain weave, begins to form on the cloth beam in front of you, growing slowly, almost imperceptibly, as each shuttle pass adds one more horizontal thread to the pattern. Your job is to produce approximately 120 yards of this sheeting per 12-hour shift. The math works out to about 10 yards per hour, which sounds reasonable until you factor in thread breaks, bobbin changes, and the general chaos of keeping a temperamental machine running smoothly. The heat is building fast. Between the humid air pumped in to protect the thread and the friction heat from 200 operating machines, the room temperature is climbing toward its standard 90-degree plateau. You're already sweating through your underlinen, and the workday is literally 4 minutes old. By noon, you'll be drenched. By evening, you'll smell like a stable and feel like death. But at least you're not outside in the freezing cold, right? That's what they tell you. Indoor work, so refined, so respectable. Sure, respectable. That's exactly the word that comes to mind as sweat drips into your eyes and cotton dust coats your lungs. Your hands find their rhythm automatically, checking tension, watching for breaks, monitoring the steady bang 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 of the shuttle. The loom runs itself mostly, but it demands constant vigilance. Look away for 30 seconds and a thread breaks. Miss a broken thread and you've got a flaw in the fabric. Flaws mean the quality inspector rejects your work. Rejected work means no pay for that section. No pay means, well, it means you can't afford even the meagre existence you're currently maintaining. The overseer, Mr. Brennan, a thin-lipped man with all the warmth of a January wind, is already pacing the aisles, hands clasped behind his back, watching everyone with the intensity of a hawk eyeing mice. He doesn't say good morning. He doesn't acknowledge your existence. He just watches and judges and waits for someone to make a mistake worth docking pay over. It's motivational in the way that having a vulture circle overhead is motivational. It certainly keeps you alert. You settle into position in front of your loom, feet slightly apart for balance, ready to stand here without moving for the next several hours. The shuttle bangs back and forth, the heddles rise and fall, the fabric grows, thread by thread. You've officially started your workday, and the only thing ahead of you is more of exactly this until the blessed 7 p.m. bell releases you back into the winter darkness. The first hour dissolves into a rhythm that's simultaneously hypnotic and maddening. Your eyes track the shuttle as it races left, right, a blur of wood and thread moving so fast it's almost abstract. Bang, bang, bang goes the reed, packing each new thread tight against the last. Click, clack go the heddles, lifting and lowering the warp threads in their endless pattern. Your brain starts to tune it out, not consciously, but as a survival mechanism, creating a kind of white noise effect where the cacophony recedes to background static and you enter a trance-like state that's probably not healthy but definitely necessary. The shuttle makes approximately 180 passes per minute when everything's running smoothly. That's 3 per second, 10 to 800 per hour, roughly 150,000 per shift if you do the disturbing math. Each pass creates a tiny fraction of fabric, maybe a 1/16th of an inch of progress toward your 120-yard quota. The numbers are absurd when you think about them, so you've trained yourself not to think about them. You just watch and react and keep the machine fed with thread like you're tending some mechanical predator that will turn on you the second you show weakness. Your feet are already starting to hurt. The factory floor is unfinished wood. Remember those splinters we mentioned? And it has absolutely zero give. Standing on concrete would almost be better, because at least concrete is consistent, but wood warps and creates pressure points that find every sensitive spot on your feet. You shift your weight from left foot to right, then back again, a little dance you'll perform approximately 3,000 times today. Some girls stuff their boots with newspaper or cloth scraps for cushioning, but that creates its own problems. Reduced circulation, sweaty feet, and the distinct possibility of trench foot-style conditions if you're not careful. There's a quirky historical detail about factory footwear that rarely makes it into the literature. Many mill workers in the 1850s wore their boots until they literally fell apart, then patched them with whatever materials were available, leather scraps, canvas, even tin sheeting in desperate cases. Buying new boots cost roughly half a week's wages, so you wore those things until your toes poked through, and then a bit longer for good measure. Your current boots are on their 3rd round of patching, and you're estimating maybe 2 more months before they're unsalvageable, and you have to face the financial trauma of replacement. The shuttle snags, not a full break, just a momentary hitch in the rhythm where something catches wrong and the thread develops a loop. Your hand shoots out automatically, muscle memory faster than conscious thought, and you trip the disengagement lever. The loom stutters to a halt, the sudden silence from your machine creating a noticeable gap in the overall factory roar. You have maybe 20 seconds before Mr. Brennan notices and starts drifting your direction with that expression that says, "Explain why you're wasting company time." You lean in close to examine the problem, squinting in the inadequate light. There it is, a slub in the thread, a thick spot where the spinner's tension wavered and created an irregularity. The slub caught in the shuttle eye, creating the loop. You carefully work it free, smooth the thread, and check the next several feet for additional problems. The thread looks decent, no more obvious flaws, so you re-engage the loom and it roars back to life. Total stoppage time, maybe 15 seconds. Mr. Brennan is 3 aisles over, haranguing some poor girl whose thread actually broke. You've dodged his attention, which counts as a minor victory. Back into the rhythm. The shuttle resumes its hypnotic race. Your eyes glaze over slightly as you watch, not focusing on anything specific, but maintaining a kind of diffuse awareness that lets you spot problems before they become catastrophes. It's a skill you've developed over 8 months. This ability to look without looking, to see without really seeing, to maintain vigilance while simultaneously letting your mind wander to literally anywhere else. You think about home, the farm you left behind, your parents struggling with crops and debt, your younger siblings who need the money you send back every month. The farm was brutal in its own way, certainly, but at least you could see the sky. At least the work varied with the seasons. At least you weren't breathing cotton dust for 14 hours while standing in one spot listening to machinery that's slowly destroying your hearing. But the farm wasn't paying anything, and mouths needed feeding, so here you are, sacrificing your health and sanity so that your family can eat. The economics of rural poverty are compelling arguments for factory work, even when factory work is its own special circle of hell. Historians still argue whether the mid-19th century shift from agricultural to industrial labour represented progress or exploitation, but honestly, from where you're standing, literally standing for hours on end, in front of a machine that doesn't care if you live or die, it feels less like a binary choice and more like picking between 2 different flavours of suffering. At least factory suffering pays slightly better and comes with the vague promise of independence, even if that independence mostly manifests as the freedom to be exhausted in a rented bed instead of your childhood bedroom. The girl at the loom beside you, Martha, a quiet type from Vermont, catches your eye and makes a gesture that roughly translates to "kill me now." You respond with a slight eye roll that conveys, "We're already dead, this is hell, we're ghosts who don't know it yet." She almost smiles, which is about as much joy as you can expect at 6:30 a.m. on a Tuesday in a textile factory. Communication between workers is officially discouraged. Talking slows production and creates dangerous distraction, but humans are social creatures, and you find ways to connect even in this mechanized nightmare. The windows along the far wall are starting to show the faintest hint of dawn. Not actual sunlight yet, just a gradual shift from black to dark grey that suggests the sun is considering maybe showing up eventually. The gas lamps are still burning bright, creating their own heat and consuming oxygen in a way that makes the already stuffy air feel even more oppressive. Ventilation in this factory is minimal at best, consisting mainly of a few windows that can be opened in summer and are firmly closed in winter, because maintaining humidity is more important than worker comfort. Your back is starting to ache. Not the sharp pain of injury, but the deep, grinding discomfort of muscles held in one position for too long. You arch slightly, trying to stretch without actually moving enough to draw attention. The ideal factory worker, from management's perspective, is basically a biological automaton, present in body, absent in mind, requiring no breaks, no comfort, no acknowledgement of physical limitations. You're doing your best to approximate that ideal, while also maintaining enough humanity to not completely lose your mind. It's a delicate balance. The shuttle continues its race. The fabric continues its growth. The morning continues its slow crawl toward the 10-minute breakfast window that represents your only reprieve before the long stretch to lunch. Time in the factory doesn't flow normally. It congeals, it stretches, it plays tricks. You could swear you've been standing here for 3 hours, but when you glance at the large clock mounted on the wall, visible to all, a constant reminder of time as commodity, you discover it's been exactly 47 minutes since you started your loom. Only 13 hours and 13 minutes to go. The thought is so depressing that you immediately shove it away and return your attention to the shuttle, watching it blur back and forth, letting your mind go mercifully blank. Mr. Brennan materializes behind you like a particularly grim spectre, and you feel his presence before you actually see him. It's a sixth sense you've developed. The prey animal's awareness of a predator nearby. The air shifts, the temperature of scrutiny changes, and suddenly you're hyper-aware of every movement you make, every slight imperfection in your posture, every microscopic deviation from peak productivity. You don't turn around. You don't acknowledge him. You simply stand straighter, focus harder on your shuttle, and pray that whatever he's looking for, he finds it somewhere else. He doesn't say anything, That's the worst part. He just stands there, maybe 4 feet behind you and slightly to the left, watching your looms operation with the intense focus of a man whose entire salary depends on squeezing maximum output from minimum labor cost. You can hear his breathing, slow and measured, underneath the machinery roar. You can smell his tobacco and the pomade he uses on his thinning hair. The man is a walking anxiety trigger and he knows it. The psychological warfare is intentional. Overseers, or floor managers as some factories euphemistically call them, occupy a special place in the industrial hierarchy. They're not quite management. The actual mill owners and superintendents occupy those lofty positions, but they're definitely not workers. They're the enforcement arm, the disciplinary mechanism, the human embodiment of factory rules and production quotas. Mr. Brennan earns maybe $15 per week, which is 6 times your wage, and every penny of it comes from his ability to keep you and the other 200 women on this floor working at maximum efficiency with minimum complaint. He moves on after what feels like an eternity but is probably 30 seconds. You exhale slightly, tension releasing from your shoulders, and resist the urge to turn and watch him go. That's what he wants. Workers so nervous they can't focus on their machines, leading to mistakes, leading to opportunities for discipline. It's a game, and he's playing it at expert level while you're just trying to survive each round. 3 looms down, he stops behind Sally Brennan. No relation, different Brennan. Boston is lousy with Brennans. And you hear his voice cut through the machinery noise. Thread break, 30 seconds lost, noted. Sally's shoulders slump almost imperceptibly. That's probably a penny docked from her weekly wages, maybe 2 cents if he's in a particularly punitive mood. The deductions add up with terrifying speed. A penny for excessive thread breaks, 2 cents for talking, 5 cents for sitting when not on an authorized break, a quarter day's wages for tardiness. By the end of the week, some girls find their $2.50 wage reduced to $1.80 through the death of 1,000 tiny cuts. There's a quirky historical detail about factory discipline that doesn't make it into the uplifting narratives. Many mills employed a system of fines so comprehensive and picky that workers could theoretically owe the factory money at week's end. Laughing too loudly? Fine. Opening a window without permission? Fine. Having dirty hands even though your job involves handling cotton all day? Fine. The system was theoretically about maintaining order and efficiency, but in practice it functioned as a profit enhancement mechanism and a tool of psychological control. Historians still argue whether the overseer system was a necessary component of industrial discipline or simply institutional sadism dressed up in management language. But from your position, still feeling the residual anxiety of Mr. Brennan's presence haunting your personal space, you know exactly which interpretation feels correct. The man has rules, so many rules, written rules posted on the wall by the entrance, which you've memorized through sheer repetitive exposure. No talking during work hours, no sitting except during authorized meal breaks, no leaving your station without permission, no singing, whistling, or humming, no reading material at workstations. Maintain clean hands and proper dress, report all machinery problems immediately, achieve minimum daily quotas or face wage adjustment. The list goes on, covering approximately every action a human might want to take during 14 hours of consciousness, and forbidding most of them. But there are also unwritten rules, the ones Mr. Brennan enforces through selective attention and arbitrary interpretation. Make eye contact too much, insubordinate, make eye contact too little, suspicious, work too fast, showing off and making other workers look bad, work too slow, obviously lazy and probably stealing company time. The goalposts move based on his mood, the weather, how his breakfast sat, whether the mill owner complimented or criticized him recently. You're expected to navigate this shifting landscape perfectly, while also operating dangerous machinery and meeting rigid production quotas. It's absolutely sustainable and definitely won't lead to any mental health problems. You watch him from the corner of your eye as he continues his rounds, hands still clasped behind his back in that particular posture that communicates authority and judgment. He's checking quotas, you realize, consulting the small leather notebook he keeps in his vest pocket. Each worker's daily output is tracked meticulously. Yards of fabric produced, thread break frequency, downtime incidents. The data is relentless and unforgiving. There's no space in those columns for was feeling poorly or couldn't sleep because of nightmares about machinery accidents. There's just numbers, and numbers don't care about your humanity. Martha, 2 looms over, makes a subtle gesture. 2 fingers tapped against her temple. Code for overseer on the prowl, maximum alertness. You tap your thumb against your loom frame twice in acknowledgement. This silent communication network is how you survive. Mr. Brennan might forbid talking, but he can't stop you from developing elaborate systems of glances, gestures, and carefully timed coughs that convey information faster than words anyway. The workers always find ways to subvert the system, even when the system is designed specifically to prevent subversion. The morning light is stronger now, actual sunlight beginning to slant through the windows and create dusty beams in the cotton-filled air. The effect is almost beautiful if you ignore the fact that those dust particles are slowly destroying your lungs. Mr. Brennan passes through one of these beams, and for a moment he's backlit like some dark angel of industrial capitalism, come to judge the living and the slacking. He stops at Agnes Murphy's station. Agnes is 16, been here 3 months, still makes the rookie mistakes that draw attention. Uneven tension, Mr. Brennan announces, his voice carrying that particular tone of disappointed authority that makes you feel guilty even when you've done nothing wrong. Fabric quality compromised. 12 inches rejected. Noted. Agnes's face crumbles, but she doesn't cry. Crying would be another violation. Emotional displays disruptive to workplace efficiency. She just nods, swallows hard, and adjusts her thread tension while Mr. Brennan makes a notation in his terrible little book. You return your full attention to your own loom, determined not to give him any reason to write your name in that ledger of sins and wage deductions. Your shuttle races back and forth, your fabric grows steadily, your quota inches toward completion. You are the model worker, the invisible worker, the worker who attracts no attention and therefore suffers no consequences, at least until the next time Mr. Brennan decides to materialize behind you like a judgmental ghost, and the whole anxiety cycle starts again. It's only 7:15 a.m. He'll make approximately 40 more rounds before the day ends, each one a reminder that you're being watched, measured, evaluated, and found perpetually on the edge of inadequate. It's great for morale, really builds team spirit. The shuttle continues its race. Mr. Brennan continues his prowl. The factory grinds forward, converting human effort into cotton fabric and profit margins. And you're just one small replaceable cog in the machine, a cog that better not squeak or slow down or deviate even slightly from optimal performance, or there will be consequences. Always consequences. The fabric you're producing is called cotton sheeting, which sounds innocuous until you realize that sheeting is just a fancy term for the cheapest, plainest weave possible that can still technically be called cloth. It's destined to become bed sheets, probably, or maybe flour sacks, or possibly the lining for coffins because Victorian America had a real thing about lining everything with cotton. The irony that you're making bedding while being systematically deprived of adequate sleep is not lost on you, but dwelling on irony doesn't increase. Your yard count, so you file it away in the mental drawer labelled things to be bitter about later. Your quota is 120 yards per 12-hour shift. That's 10 yards per hour, which breaks down to 1 yard every 6 minutes, which further breaks down to roughly 1 inch of fabric every 10 seconds if you want to get really granular about the mathematics of your exploitation. The quota is theoretically achievable. Management wouldn't set impossible targets because that would be inefficient and counterproductive. But achievable assumes your loom never breaks down, your thread never snags, your bobbins never run empty at inconvenient moments, and you possess the stamina of a machine rather than a human being who needs to occasionally blink and breathe and experience emotions. Fall short of 120 yards, and the consequences are immediate and financial. The factory operates on a piece rate system, which sounds fair in theory. You get paid for what you produce, but in practice functions as a mechanism to transfer all risk from employer to employee. Make your quota, you get your full $2.50 weekly wage, which works out to roughly 2 cents per yard of fabric. Fall short, your wages are reduced proportionally, which means that Monday's migraine or Wednesday's broken shuttle directly impacts your ability to pay for food and shelter. It's motivational in the way that a gun to your head is motivational. The fabric emerging from your loom is approximately 36 inches wide, a yard wide conveniently, because America is deeply committed to the yard as a unit of measurement. Even though the metric system exists and is objectively better, the weave is plain tabby, which means the weft thread goes over one warp thread and under the next in the simplest possible pattern. A child could design it. In fact, children probably did design it, back in the mists of textile history when weaving was still a craft rather than an industrial process. You glance at the fabric accumulating on the cloth beam in front of you, trying to estimate how many yards you've produced so far. Maybe 15? 20? It's hard to tell without stopping to measure, and stopping to measure is time wasted. The fabric is white, or off-white really, with that slightly grey cast that comes from cotton that hasn't been bleached to within an inch of its molecular structure. It's also liberally flecked with darker spots, bits of cotton debris, microscopic machinery oil, and probably some of your own blood from where your fingers are developing the calluses and small cuts that define experienced weaver hands. Quality control is supposedly rigorous. A fabric inspector will eventually examine your day's production, looking for flaws, skipped threads, uneven tension, slubs, stains, anything that makes the fabric less than perfect. Find a flaw, and that section gets rejected. Rejected sections don't count toward your quota. Too many rejected sections, and you're having a conversation with Mr. Brennan about whether you're suited for this work, which is code for we can replace you in about 15 minutes with any of the 40 women currently desperate for factory employment. There's a quirky historical detail about textile quality standards in the 1850s. Different fabrics were held to wildly different inspection criteria based on their intended use. Sheeting like what you're producing could have minor imperfections because it was considered utilitarian cloth. But finer fabrics destined for wealthy customers' clothing or home furnishings. Inspectors would reject entire bolts for flaws invisible to the naked eye. The class hierarchy extended even to the thread count of your bed sheets, because of course it did. Your hands are developing a fine tremor from the constant vibration of the loom. It's subtle now, early in the shift, but by hour 10 your hands will be shaking noticeably, and by hour 12 you'll struggle to thread a needle or hold a spoon steady. The tremor is semi-permanent for experienced weavers. You've noticed that women who've been at this for years have hands that shake slightly even at rest, like they've internalized the machinery's rhythm into their very nervous system. It's probably not great for your long-term neurological health, but long-term health is a luxury concern for people who aren't worried about making rent next week. Historians still argue whether piece rate payment systems represented a fairer form of compensation compared to flat daily wages, or whether they were simply a clever way to make workers police their own productivity while eliminating employer responsibility for adequate working conditions. Shocking absolutely no one who's actually worked piece rate. You're firmly in the this is exploitation dressed up as meritocracy camp. The thread tension requires constant micro-adjustments. Too tight, and the warp threads snap under stress. Too loose, and the fabric develops an uneven, puckered appearance that inspectors reject on site. Your fingers work the tension screws without conscious thought, tightening here, loosening there, maintaining that perfect balance through sheer accumulated experience. It's a skill, genuinely, though not one that commands much respect or compensation in the broader economy. Textile weaver doesn't have quite the cachet of master craftsman, even though the actual technical demands are substantial. The shuttle needs a fresh bobbin. You can tell because the thread is feeding thinner, the bobbin nearly empty inside the shuttle. You disengage the loom, another 15 seconds of stopped production, pop open the shuttle, and swap bobbins with practiced efficiency. The depleted bobbin goes into a collection bin beside your station. Someone will gather these later for refilling in the spinning room. The new bobbin slots in perfectly, thread feeding smooth, and you re-engage the loom. Total stoppage, 18 seconds. Acceptable, though not ideal. You're hyper-aware of every second, because seconds add up to minutes, minutes to yards, yards to wages, wages to survival. The math is relentless. 15 more yards and you'll be at the 1/4 mark for your quota. 30 yards completed feels like an achievement, even though it's literally just baseline performance. Your sense of accomplishment has been recalibrated by factory work to celebrate meeting minimum expectations, which is probably not healthy psychologically, but definitely keeps you motivated to avoid the alternative, being below minimum expectations and watching your already meager wages shrink further. The fabric continues to grow, thread by thread, inch by inch. It's mesmerizing in a brain-numbing way, this gradual accumulation of material value from raw thread. You're creating something, technically, participating in the industrial economy, transforming cotton from southern plantations, grown by enslaved labor, though we don't talk about that in polite factory company, into finished goods for northern consumers. You're a vital link in the supply chain, an essential component of American manufacturing, a valued contributor to economic progress. You're also being paid roughly 2 cents per hour when you account for the actual time invested. But at least you're valued, right? The dignity of labor and all that uplifting rhetoric. The shuttle races back and forth. Your yard count inches upward. The clock on the wall mocks you with its glacial progress. Only 9 more hours until the blessed release of the 7 p.m. bell, and only 90 more yards of fabric to produce before you can collect your full wages and avoid Mr. Brennan's disappointed notation in his ledger of failures. Totally achievable, completely reasonable. You've got this. Probably. The noise is not just sound. It's a physical presence, a living entity that occupies every cubic inch of air in this room and hammers against your skull like it's personally angry at your brain. 200 power looms running simultaneously create approximately 105 decibels of sustained racket, which is roughly equivalent to standing next to a chainsaw or attending a rock concert. Except those experiences last minutes or hours, and you get to leave. You get 14 hours of this 6 days a week with no earplugs, because earplugs haven't been invented yet for industrial use, and wouldn't be provided even if they had been, because that would cost money and interfere with your ability to hear the overseer's shouted commands. The sound has layers. There's the bass rhythm of the shuttles. Bang, 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 200 of them slightly out of sync, creating a cascading wall of impacts that never quite resolves into a unified beat. Underneath that, the deeper thrum of the drive shafts spinning overhead, leather belts whirring and slapping, wooden gears grinding against each other. Higher pitched, the whine of individual spindles, the squeal of parts that need oil but won't get it until something actually breaks. The occasional crash when someone's shuttle jams or a warp thread snaps with a sound like a tiny gunshot. All of it combines into an acoustic assault that makes thought difficult and conversation essentially impossible. You've watched new girls try to talk during their first week. They lean in close to each other, shouting directly into ears, straining to be heard. After a few days, they give up. Everyone gives up. The factory noise wins, and you adapt by developing that elaborate system of hand signals and exaggerated lip movements that lets you communicate "my thread broke" or "overseer behind you" without actually producing sound. There's something deeply dystopian about a workplace that's too loud for human speech, but here you are, living the dystopia, so it must be normal and fine. The hearing damage is cumulative and permanent. You've noticed that long-time mill workers, women who've been at this for 5-10 years, speak loudly even in quiet environments and frequently ask people to repeat themselves. The factory is literally vibrating their eardrums into submission, destroying the delicate mechanisms of human hearing through sheer acoustic brutality. In 30 years, you'll be partially deaf. In 50 years, if you live that long, you'll be functionally deaf. But that's future you's problem, and right now, Present You needs to focus on making quota while surrounded by the mechanical roar of industrial progress. The heat is climbing with the advancing morning. The factory floor is designed to maintain approximately 90 degrees Fahrenheit and 70 to 80% humidity because those conditions minimize thread breakage. Cotton fibers are hygroscopic. They absorb moisture from the air, and moist fibers are stronger and more pliable than dry ones. So the mill management pumps in steam, keeps the windows closed, and basically converts the workspace into a tropical greenhouse where humans wilt and cotton thrives. It's brilliant engineering if your priority is fabric quality and you consider workers to be infinitely replaceable components. By 7 a.m., the temperature has hit its target and you're already soaked with sweat. Not glistening or perspiring, soaked. Your underlinen is damp against your skin, your dress is developing dark patches under the arms and down the back, and your hair is plastered to your forehead despite the cap you're wearing. The other women look equally bedraggled, faces flushed red from heat and exertion, breathing shallow because the humid air feels thick enough to chew. Some girls have loosened their collar buttons in violation of the dress code, but Mr. Brennan has apparently decided that heat prostration is worse for productivity than minor modesty infractions, so he's letting it slide. Small mercies. There's a quirky historical detail about factory temperature control that rarely makes it into the sanitized narratives. Many mills in the 1850s had ongoing battles between workers who wanted windows open for ventilation and management who wanted them closed for humidity control. Some factories eventually compromise by installing primitive air circulation systems, basically just fans and water sprays. But your factory isn't progressive enough for such luxuries. You get closed windows, steam pipes, and the hope that you don't actually collapse from heat exhaustion, because the company doesn't provide medical care. The combination of heat and noise creates a sensory overload that's genuinely disorienting. Your brain is simultaneously processing the physical assault of sound, the oppressive weight of humid heat, the visual demand of watching your shuttle, and the tactical awareness needed to avoid machinery injuries. It's too much input, too much stimulation, too much everything. Some part of your consciousness simply shuts down. You enter a fugue state, a dissociative zone where you're physically present but mentally elsewhere, your body maintaining the work while your mind retreats to some safer internal space. Historians still argue whether factory workers developed genuine psychological coping mechanisms or simply experienced early forms of industrial trauma, but from your current position, sweating profusely while your ears ring and your brain desperately tries to process information through the sensory chaos, you're pretty sure it's trauma. Definitely trauma. This isn't healthy adaptation. This is survival mode. The air quality is its own special nightmare. Between the heat, the humidity, and the cotton dust hanging in suspension, like the world's itchiest fog, each breath feels like you're inhaling warm soup made of fiber particles and sadness. Your lungs protest. You cough, a short, sharp hack that you've learned to suppress because coughing is disruptive, and Mr. Brennan takes note of workers who seem sickly or weak. You swallow the next cough, feel it settle in your chest like a small stone of condensed misery, and continue breathing the terrible air because the alternative is suffocation. The windows along the far wall show brilliant morning sunshine outside, a beautiful late winter day, probably crisp and cold and perfect if you were literally anywhere else. But you're here, in this heated, deafening chamber, watching that sunshine like it's a view from prison, which honestly isn't far from the truth. You're not shackled or literally imprisoned, but you're economically bound to this space for 14 hours through the iron chains of poverty and necessity. The sunshine might as well be on another planet. Your dress is definitely going to need washing after today, which means either paying Mrs. Donnelly's laundry fee or spending your one day off scrubbing clothes in cold water with lye soap that destroys your hands. Neither option is appealing, but such are the glamorous choices available to a mill girl in 1855 Boston. The heat continues to build. You're pretty sure it's actually climbing past 90 degrees now, approaching 95, which is standard for mid-morning, once all the machinery is fully warmed up and generating friction heat. Someone 3 rows over stumbles. You catch the movement peripherally, a girl swaying, catching herself on her loom frame. Heat exhaustion, probably, or just general fatigue. She recovers, straightens up, returns to work. No one rushes to help because you can't leave your station without permission, and stopping to help would just mean 2 people falling behind on quota instead of 1. The factory has efficiently trained you to ignore each other's distress unless it directly threatens productivity. It's community building in reverse, atomization through economic pressure. The noise continues to pound, the heat continues to oppress. Your senses are under siege, and you still have approximately 8.5 hours left in this shift. The breakfast bell will ring eventually, 10 minutes of reprieve where you can gulp down food, and maybe step near a window that's cracked open an inch. But that's still 45 minutes away, and right now, 45 minutes feels like 45 years. The shuttle races back and forth, your fabric grows, your body suffers. The industrial machine grinds forward, converting human endurance into cotton sheeting and profit margins, one deafening, sweltering minute at a time. The breakfast bell cuts through the machinery roar at exactly 8 a.m., and the sound triggers a Pavlovian response in your body that's almost embarrassing. Your stomach clenches with anticipatory hunger, despite the fact that what you're about to consume barely qualifies as food. The bell doesn't mean you stop working, though. That would be too humane. It means you have 10 minutes to eat whatever you've brought while continuing to monitor your loom, because productivity cannot be interrupted for trivialities like human sustenance. You disengage your loom with one hand while reaching for your tin pail with the other, a feat of coordination that would be impressive if it weren't so depressing. The sudden relative quiet from your machine stopping is almost shocking, though quiet is deeply relative when 199 other looms are still hammering away. Your ears ring in the partial silence, that high-pitched whine that suggests permanent auditory damage is well underway. You shake it off and pop open the pail that's been sitting beside your station since 5:15 this morning, marinating in factory heat and cotton dust for nearly 3 hours. Inside, 2 slices of bread from yesterday's loaf, already stale when you bought it from the bakery for 3 cents. The bread is wrapped in a cloth that's doing absolutely nothing to protect it from the ambient cotton fibers that infiltrate everything in this building. You unwrap it carefully and sure enough, the bread surface is lightly frosted with white dust like the world's least appetizing powdered sugar. You blow on it half-heartedly, a gesture of attempted cleanliness that could accomplish anything, and take a bite. The bread is aggressively mediocre, dry, dense, faintly sour in that way that suggests the baker used yesterday's unsold inventory as today's featured offering. You chew mechanically, trying to work up enough saliva to actually swallow without choking. Around you, other women are executing the same joyless ritual, unwrapping food, eating without pleasure, trying to fuel their bodies enough to survive the next 6 hours until the blessed lunch bell. Your second breakfast component is cold tea in a small glass bottle that Mrs. Donnelly grudgingly filled this morning for a penny. The tea was probably hot at 4:45 a.m., but 3 hours at factory temperature has transformed it into a lukewarm, slightly bitter liquid that tastes like regret and leaves. You take a long drink anyway, because hydration is crucial when you're sweating through your clothes and water from the factory pump is of deeply questionable quality. There's a reason the dysentery outbreaks cluster around mill districts. The tea helps wash down the bread at least. You alternate. Bite of stale bread, sip of sad tea, bite of bread, sip of tea. It's not satisfying. It's not nutritious enough for the physical demands of factory work, and it's definitely not the wholesome meals that mill recruitment pamphlets promised when you signed on. But it's calories, and calories are currency when your body's burning through energy like a furnace burns coal. There's a quirky historical detail about mill worker nutrition that doesn't make it into the romanticized accounts. Many factory girls in the 1850s suffered from chronic malnutrition, despite working in one of the wealthiest cities in America. The combination of low wages, high boarding house costs, and limited time for meal preparation meant that diets consisted primarily of bread, tea, occasional cheese, and whatever cheap carbohydrates could be consumed quickly. Fresh vegetables, luxury items, meat, special occasions only. Your body is essentially running on 19th century poverty rations while performing industrial labour that would challenge a well-fed athlete. You glance at your loom while eating, watching the warp threads for any signs of impending breaks. Can't fully stop being vigilant even during your 10-minute breakfast window because a broken thread during your break still counts against your productivity. The factory has cleverly engineered a situation where you're never truly off duty, never fully resting, always maintaining partial awareness of the machine's needs. It's excellent for profit margins and terrible for human nervous systems, but nobody asked your opinion on workplace design. Martha, at the next loom, is eating an apple, an actual apple. You stare at it with the covetous intensity of someone who hasn't seen fresh fruit in approximately 6 weeks. Apples in February cost about 8 cents each, more than 3 hours of your labour, so they're firmly in the impossible luxury category. Martha catches you looking and shrugs apologetically, as if owning an apple is something to feel guilty about. Maybe her family sent it from their farm. Maybe she has a suitor who's courting her with produce. Maybe she sold her soul to dark forces in exchange for vitamin C. Whatever the source, you're jealous enough to briefly consider crime. Your hands are filthy. You notice this while eating, which is unfortunate timing. Your fingers are black with machine oil, grey with cotton dust, and decorated with several small cuts that have accumulated throughout the morning. You're literally eating with hands that should be washed, but there's no time to walk to the wash basin and back, so you just eat with dirty hands and try not to think about bacteria and disease transmission. Historians still argue whether the high mortality rates among factory workers were primarily due to occupational hazards or general poor sanitation, but from where you're sitting, eating bread with filthy hands in a room full of airborne particulates, you're thinking it's probably both. The bread is gone in 4 bites, the tea is drained. You've consumed maybe 300 calories, which is woefully inadequate for a 14-hour shift of physical labour, but it's what you can afford and what you have time to eat. The whole breakfast has taken maybe 6 minutes, leaving you 4 minutes of the official break to just exist. Stand here, breathe, let your feet hurt slightly less. It's not rest exactly, but it's a microscopic reduction in immediate suffering, and you'll take it. Other women are finishing their meals too. Some are more prepared than you. They've brought cheese or cold meat, actual protein that might sustain them. A few have nothing at all, either because they couldn't afford food or because they're sending every possible cent back to family and choosing hunger over poverty. You've skipped breakfast before, on particularly tight financial weeks, and the result is always the same: dizzy by 10 a.m, shaking by noon, barely functional by evening. So you scrape together the pennies for bread and tea even when it hurts the budget. The 10 minutes are evaporating. You can feel time compressing, the brief respite ending before it's really begun. Around the room, women are re-engaging their looms, the noise level climbing back toward its standard deafening intensity as machines roar back to life. The breakfast bell will ring again in 30 seconds to signal the end of the break, but you don't need the bell. Your body has learned the rhythm, internalized the timing, become synchronized with the factory's demands. You wipe your hands on your apron, which is already so filthy that adding breadcrumbs and tea stains makes no appreciable difference. The apron was probably white once, in some distant past before factory work, but now it's a mottled grey-brown that represents months of accumulated industrial grime. Laundry day can't come soon enough, though when it does come, you'll be scrubbing this thing with lye soap until your knuckles bleed. The end of break bell rings. 10 minutes has passed. You've eaten, you've drunk lukewarm tea, you've rested for approximately 240 seconds total. Now it's back to the loom, back to the heat and noise and endless standing, back to producing cotton sheeting for people who will never know your name or care about the conditions under which their cheap fabric was manufactured. You pull the engagement lever, your loom roars back to life, shuttle resuming its hypnotic race, fabric continuing its incremental growth. The morning stretches ahead, still 4 more hours until lunch, still 90 more yards to weave before day's end. Your stomach is marginally less empty. Your energy is marginally renewed. It'll have to be enough, because enough is all the factory provides, and wanting more is just setting yourself up for disappointment. The shuttle bangs back and forth. Time grinds forward. You return to the trance state, the dissociative fugue where hours pass without conscious awareness. At least your bread is eaten, even if it wasn't particularly worth eating. By 9 a.m, your back has progressed from mildly uncomfortable to actively screaming. It's not one specific spot. That would be too merciful. It's a broad, radiating ache that starts in your lower spine and spreads upward like roots of pain growing through your vertebrae. Standing in essentially the same position for 4 hours will do that to a human body, especially when that position requires a slight forward lean to monitor the loom and constant micro-adjustments to maintain balance on unforgiving wooden floors. Your muscles are staging a revolt, sending increasingly urgent messages to your brain that maybe, just maybe, you should sit down or lie down, or literally do anything other than continue standing. You can't sit down. Sitting is forbidden except during the 30-minute lunch break, which is still 3 hours away. You've seen what happens when someone tries to perch on their stool during work hours. Mr. Brennan appears like he's been summoned by dark magic, and the fine is immediate and substantial. So you stand, and your back screams, and you develop creative coping strategies like shifting your weight every 30 seconds, or doing subtle calf raises, or mentally cataloguing every ache and pain as a distraction from the larger existential horror of your situation. The thread breaks are multiplying. This is normal for mid-morning. The warp threads have been under tension for hours now, and the weaker ones are starting to fail. You've had 3 breaks in the last 20 minutes, which isn't catastrophic, but isn't great either. Each break requires you to stop the loom, locate the broken thread among the hundreds stretched across the frame, tie the ends back together with a weaver's knot that takes approximately 10 seconds if you're skilled, and 30 seconds if you're fumbling, and restart the machine. Total downtime per break, maybe 25 seconds, times 3 breaks, 75 seconds of lost production. 75 seconds doesn't sound like much until you do the math. Your quota is 120 yards per 720 minutes of shift time, which works out to approximately 10 inches of fabric per minute when everything's running smoothly. 75 seconds of stoppage equals roughly 125 inches of lost production. That's 10.5 feet of fabric you're now behind schedule, and the morning isn't even half over. The math of poverty is relentless, and the math of productivity is its evil twin. A fourth thread breaks. Of course it does. This one's in the middle of the warp, which means you have to lean across the loom frame to reach it, stretching your already angry back into positions that make your spine crackle in ways that cannot be medically advisable. You grab the broken ends, they're thin and slippery with sizing, and tie them together with fingers that are developing a fine tremor from vibration exposure and general exhaustion. The knot holds. You restart the loom and watch anxiously for a few seconds to make sure the repair doesn't immediately fail. It doesn't. Small victory. There's a quirky historical detail about weavers' knots that textile historians find fascinating and workers find mundane. The specific knot used in 19th century mills was called a weaver's knot or sheet bend, and it's the same knot sailors used for joining ropes. The technique was probably transmitted from maritime trades to textile work, which makes sense given that Boston was a major port city where skills migrated between industries. You don't care about the historical lineage of your knot-tying technique. You just care that it's fast and holds under tension. Your productivity is slipping. You can feel it in the accumulation of small delays, the thread breaks, the bobbin changes, the moments of inattention where you zone out and the loom runs for 30 seconds, producing slightly uneven fabric that might get rejected by quality control. You're maybe 5 yards behind where you should be at this hour. 5 yards is approximately 20 cents of lost wages if you can't make it up later. 20 cents is 2 loaves of bread, or a third of your weekly tea budget. The stakes are simultaneously trivial and devastating. Historians still argue whether piece rate quotas in 19th century factories were set at achievable levels or deliberately inflated to extract maximum labour. But from your current position, frantically tying broken threads while calculating how many yards you're behind schedule, you're leaning heavily toward the deliberately inflated interpretation. The quotas are achievable on perfect days when nothing goes wrong, but nothing ever goes perfectly, so you're perpetually chasing an impossible standard. The physical toll is mounting faster now. Your feet hurt in that deep bone ache way that suggests you're doing actual structural damage to your arches. Your knees are locked from standing rigid, which is terrible for circulation but necessary for stability. Your shoulders are creeping up toward your ears from tension, creating a growing headache at the base of your skull. Your hands are their own catalogue of pain, calluses forming and breaking open simultaneously, small cuts from sharp thread ends, that persistent tremor, the beginning of what will eventually become permanent nerve damage if you do this work long enough. A fifth thread breaks. You've lost count of how many that is total for the morning. Maybe 8, 10. The numbers blur together. You stop the loom with a sigh that's equal parts frustration and resignation, locate the break, tie the knot, restart. The routine is so automatic now that you could probably do it in your sleep, which is fortunate because you're operating on maybe 5 hours of fragmented sleep and running on fumes and stale bread. The other women are experiencing the same mid-morning crisis. You can see it in their movements, the slight slump in shoulders, the increased frequency of stretching, the way everyone's pace has simultaneously intensified as we all realize we're behind quota and need to push harder. There's a collective acceleration happening, an unspoken agreement that the next 3 hours before lunch are critical for making up lost ground. The factory has trained you to police your own productivity, to push your own bodies past reasonable limits, to internalize the quota pressure until it becomes self-enforcing. It's efficient management and brutal psychology all wrapped up together. Your back spasms, a sharp, sudden clench of muscle that makes you gasp and grab the loom frame for support. The spasm passes after a few seconds, leaving behind a deeper, more persistent ache. You straighten up carefully, testing your spine's willingness to continue supporting you. It's willing, barely, though it's lodging formal complaints with every vertebra. 3 more hours until lunch, 90 more yards to produce before day's end. Your body is breaking down in real time, and you're only 4 hours into a 14-hour shift. The shuttle continues its relentless race. The fabric continues its incremental growth. You continue standing, aching, tying broken threads, and pushing toward a quota that feels simultaneously mandatory and impossible. This is the productivity push, the mid-morning grind, the point where determination meets physical limitation, and you discover exactly how much suffering you can endure in exchange for $2.50 per week. The answer is, quite a lot apparently. More than you thought. More than you should have to. But here you are, pushing through, because the alternative is unemployment and starvation, and those options are somehow even worse than this. The looms are dangerous in ways that are simultaneously obvious and insidious. The obvious dangers are right there in front of you. Rapidly moving shuttles that could crack your skull if they flew off their tracks, spinning gears that could catch loose hair or clothing, heavy iron frames that could crush a foot if you stumbled wrong. But the insidious dangers are worse, the ones that creep up through fatigue and inattention, and the simple fact that human reflexes aren't designed to operate safely around machinery for 14 consecutive hours. You've seen injuries. Minor ones happen daily. Fingers caught between moving parts, hands sliced by sharp thread, feet smashed by dropped equipment. The girls bind up their wounds with scraps of cloth, maybe pour some whiskey on the cut if it's particularly nasty, and return to work because stopping means lost wages. Major injuries happen less frequently but with devastating regularity. Maybe one serious accident per month in this factory alone, more during peak production periods when everyone's pushed harder and exhaustion makes people careless. The machinery has no safety guards worth mentioning. The moving parts are exposed, the belts and gears accessible, the whole mechanical assembly designed for efficiency and maintenance access rather than worker protection. There's a basic economic calculus at play. Safety features cost money to install and reduce production speed. Injured workers are replaceable at minimal cost. The math is brutal, and the conclusion inevitable. Emma Larson is 2 rows ahead of you, working her loom with the practiced efficiency of someone who's been at this for 18 months. She's maybe 19 years old, Swedish immigrant, sends money back to family in Minnesota, always wears her blonde hair in 2 tight braids wrapped around her head. You've spoken to her maybe 3 times total, brief exchanges during lunch, nothing deep. She's just another mill girl, another face in the crowd, another body feeding the industrial machine. You happen to be watching when it happens. Not intentionally, you're just glancing around during a bobbin change, that brief moment when your attention isn't laser-focused on your own loom. Emma is leaning over her machine, reaching for something. Maybe a broken thread in the back section, maybe adjusting the cloth beam tension. The specifics don't matter because what happens next unfolds with the horrifying inevitability of a Greek tragedy. Her right hand, she's reaching across the loom's width, stretching to reach something, passes too close to the beater bar. That's the heavy wooden bar that swings forward with each shuttle pass to pack the weft threads tight. It moves fast, maybe 60 swings per minute, and it moves with enough force to compress cotton fibers into dense fabric. Emma's hand is in the wrong place at the wrong moment. The beater bar swings forward. The sound is different from the normal loom noise. It's a wet crunch, audible even over the machinery roar, followed immediately by Emma's scream, a high, piercing shriek that cuts through the factory din like a knife. Her hand is caught. The machinery doesn't stop. Can't stop, really, because individual looms don't have emergency brakes, and the drive shaft overhead keeps spinning regardless of human suffering. Calibrated narrative impact while avoiding gratuitous detail. I need to describe this carefully, making it real and impactful without being gratuitously graphic. The key is the horror of the situation and the factory's response, not dwelling on gore. I should focus on what the narrator sees and feels, the reactions around them, and the systemic callousness of continuing production. Emma's trying to pull her hand free, but the beater bar has trapped her fingers against the reed. The loom continues operating. Another swing of the beater. Emma screams again, a sound of pure animal agony. Finally, she has the presence of mind to grab the disengagement lever with her left hand and kill power to her machine. The loom shudders to a halt. The damage is immediately visible and absolutely sickening. Her right hand is a mess of crushed tissue and blood. 2 fingers, the index and middle, are clearly destroyed, hanging at angles that fingers shouldn't hang, bone visible through torn skin. Blood is already pooling on the loom frame, dripping onto the white cotton fabric below and creating stark red stains that will definitely be rejected by quality control. You've frozen. In place, staring, your own loom still running because you haven't had the presence of mind to disengage it. Other women are reacting similarly, some stopping their machines to look, others continuing work because stopping without permission means fines. The factory's training runs deep. Personal crisis takes second priority to production quotas. Mr. Brennan appears within seconds, moving faster than you've ever seen him move. But he's not rushing to Emma's aid, he's rushing to assess the situation's impact on production. "Get her to the office," he barks at the two women nearest Emma. "Someone clean that blood off the loom and fabric. You," pointing at another worker, "take over her station. The rest of you back to work. Now." Two women help Emma away from her machine. She's pale, shaking, cradling her destroyed hand against her chest, while blood seeps through the cloth someone's wrapped around it. She's crying, sobbing really, and stumbling as they half drag her toward the stairwell. The factory office has some basic medical supplies: bandages, whiskey for disinfecting, maybe laudanum for pain. But nothing like actual medical care. Whether Emma will be taken to hospital depends on whether she can afford it and whether the factory decides the injury merits that expense. The answer is usually no. Most injured workers are simply sent back to their boarding houses to recover or die on their own time and their own dime. There's a quirky historical detail that rarely makes it into the industrial triumph narratives. Many factories in the 1850s had no workers' compensation, no insurance, no employer liability for workplace injuries. Get hurt on the job, that's your problem. Can't work anymore? You're fired, and good luck surviving without income while you heal. The system is absolutely designed to protect workers and definitely not structured to maximize profits, while externalizing all risk onto the most vulnerable. Someone is already at Emma's loom, a replacement pulled from wherever they keep spare workers. The blood is being wiped away with rags that will probably just be rinsed and reused. The damaged fabric is being cut out and discarded. Production loss noted, someone's quota will be adjusted to compensate. Within 5 minutes of the accident, Emma's loom is running again under new management, the only evidence of catastrophe being some pink-stained water in a bucket and the conspicuous absence of a blonde Swedish girl. Your own loom has continued running throughout this entire incident. You're behind schedule now from the minute or two you spent staring in horror instead of working. The shuttle races back and forth, oblivious to human suffering, concerned only with the mechanical imperative to weave thread into fabric. You return your full attention to the machine, heart still pounding, hands shaking slightly more than usual. Historians still argue whether 19th century factory accidents were primarily the result of inadequate safety, standards or inevitable byproducts of complex machinery operated by tired workers. But from your current position, standing at a machine that just destroyed someone's hand, working in a factory that responded to injury by immediately resuming production, you're pretty convinced that inadequate safety standards is doing some heavy lifting in that debate. The factory grinds forward. Emma is gone, probably permanently. Crushed fingers mean she can't operate a loom anymore, which means she's economically useless to the mill, which means she'll be let go as soon as it's clear she won't recover full function. Her replacement is already matching Emma's previous production rate. The machinery doesn't care, the quota doesn't care. Mr. Brennan doesn't care beyond the inconvenience of replacing a trained worker. The industrial machine consumes bodies and moves on without pause. You weave. The shuttle bangs back and forth. Your fabric grows. Every moving part on your loom is suddenly more menacing. Every reaching motion more carefully calculated. You've just received a visceral reminder that this job can maim you in seconds, and the factory's response will be to clean up the blood and find your replacement. It's absolutely motivating in the way that existential terror is motivating. Only 8 more hours until you can leave this death trap. Only 6 more days until you're 1 day off. Only forever until you've saved enough money to escape this life entirely. The math is depressing, but at least you still have all your fingers to calculate with, for now. The lunch bell rings at noon precisely, and the sound triggers a stampede that would be comical if it weren't so desperately necessary. 200 women simultaneously disengage their looms and surge toward the stairwell with the coordinated urgency of people who've been standing for 7 straight hours and have exactly 30 minutes to eat, rest, and use the privy before the machinery summons them back. You're caught in the current, moving with the crowd down the narrow wooden stairs that were barely adequate for morning ascent, and are absolutely terrifying during the lunch rush, when everyone's tired and hurrying, and one stumble could trigger a cascade of falling bodies. The basement canteen is exactly as depressing as the name suggests. It's a low-ceilinged room that runs maybe half the length of the building, lit by oil lamps because the tiny windows at ground level provide approximately zero useful illumination. The air down here is cooler than the weaving room, maybe 70 degrees instead of 90, which feels like stepping into an Arctic paradise even though it's still stuffy and smells like old food and mildew. Long wooden tables stretch in rows, benches on either side, designed to seat 40 workers per table. There are 6 tables total, which means capacity for 240 workers. The factory employs closer to 400 across all floors and shifts. The math doesn't work, but management's solution is simple. Eat in shifts, eat faster, or don't eat. You claim a spot at the third table, squeezing onto a bench between 2 other women you vaguely recognize but don't really know. The canteen operates on a paid meal system. You can purchase lunch for 5 cents, which includes a main dish and bread, or you can bring your own food and eat it here for free. 5 cents is roughly 2 hours of wages, which makes the factory-provided lunch simultaneously convenient and extortionate. Today you're paying, mainly because you didn't have time or energy to prepare food this morning, and the alternative is not eating for another 7 hours, which experience has taught you leads to fainting around 4 p.m. The serving line is chaos. Women crowd around a long counter where 2 harried-looking kitchen workers are ladling food onto tin plates with the efficiency of people who've done this 1,000 times and find it no less tedious. The main offering today is beans, navy beans, boiled into submission with some salt pork for flavour, served in a watery sauce that's probably 90% bean cooking liquid. Alongside the beans, a square of cornbread that's dense enough to use as a weapon and about as appetizing. You hand over your 5 cents, a nickel that could have bought you 2 newspapers or half a pound of potatoes, and receive your plate. The beans are lukewarm, which suggests they've been sitting in a pot since 10 a.m. waiting for lunch service. The cornbread is room temperature and slightly stale. This is peak institutional dining, optimized for cost efficiency, rather than nutrition or pleasure. You carry your plate back to the table and sit down with the kind of relief that comes from getting weight off your feet for the first time in 7 hours. Sitting is almost painful. Your muscles have been locked in standing position for so long that your knees actually creak as you bend them, and your lower back sends shooting pains up your spine as you transition from vertical to seated. But then you're sitting, actually sitting, and the relief is so profound it's almost emotional. Your feet throb as blood flow changes. Your legs tremble slightly from released tension. You could cry from the simple joy of not standing, but crying would waste precious eating time. The beans taste like poverty with a hint of pork. They're not terrible, they're salt at least, and the texture is consistent, but they're also not good. They're fuel, calories, protein to keep your body functioning through the afternoon shift. You shovel them into your mouth with a spoon that's been used by approximately 700 other workers and washed in questionable water. The cornbread is dry and crumbly, requiring the beans liquid to become swallowable. You alternate spoonful of beans, bite of cornbread, repeat. Around you, 300 other women are executing the same joyless consumption ritual. The noise level is substantial, everyone talking at once, trying to cram social interaction and news sharing into 30 minutes. The conversations blur together. Complaints about overseers, gossip about who's courting whom, worries about sick family members, desperate strategies for making wages stretch further. There's a peculiar intimacy to communal dining in these conditions. You're packed shoulder to shoulder with strangers, sharing space and air and the collective experience of industrial exploitation. There's a quirky historical detail about factory canteen food that nutritional historians find fascinating. The meals provided in 1850s textile mills were often deliberately bland and heavy in cheap starches because management believed rich or flavorful food would make workers sluggish. The theory was that simple, boring food kept workers energized and focused, though the actual result was chronic malnutrition and scurvy among workers who couldn't afford to supplement their diets with fresh vegetables or fruit. Your beans and cornbread are continuing this proud tradition of nutritional inadequacy, masquerading as worker care. You're eating fast. Everyone is, because 30 minutes includes time for using the privy, and the privy situation is its own nightmare that you're trying not to think about too hard. The basement has 4 privies for 400 workers, which creates lines and waiting and uncomfortable situations that Victorian modesty makes everyone pretend aren't happening. You'll hold it if you can, use the facilities if you absolutely must, and try to minimize time spent in that corner of the basement where the smell alone could strip paint. The woman to your left is crying quietly into her beans. You don't ask why. It could be anything. Homesickness, exhaustion, the accumulated weight of existence in this place. The woman to your right is eating with mechanical efficiency while staring at nothing, eyes glazed in that 1,000-yard stare that suggests she's mentally elsewhere. You're probably wearing a similar expression. The canteen is full of women physically present but psychologically checked out. Bodies refueling while minds retreat to safer spaces. Historians still argue whether factory-provided meal services represented genuine employer concern for worker welfare, or simply another profit opportunity dressed up as benevolence. But from your current position, eating overpriced beans that barely qualify as food, you're comfortable asserting it's definitely the profit thing. The factory makes money on your labour, and then makes additional money selling you the food you need to continue labouring. It's a perfect closed economic loop where you're both producer and consumer, and the house always wins. The beans are gone in maybe 6 minutes. The cornbread takes another 3, because it's so dry you need to chew carefully to avoid choking. 9 minutes of eating, leaving 21 minutes for what? Resting, socializing, contemplating the meaninglessness of existence. You choose resting, letting your body slump against the table, head propped on one hand, just breathing and not moving and savouring every second of authorised sitting. Around you, other women are doing the same, creating a tableau of exhausted bodies in various states of collapse. Some have their heads down on the table, actually sleeping in 10-minute increments. Others are engaged in quiet conversation, maintaining human connection in small, precious moments. A few are crying, one woman is praying, lips moving silently. The basement canteen is a liminal space where the performance of productivity briefly pauses and raw humanity bleeds through. The return bell rings at 12:30, and the collective groan that ripples through the canteen is almost musical in its shared misery. 30 minutes has evaporated like morning dew, and now it's time to haul your semi-rested body back up 4 flights of stairs to resume the standing and weaving performance for another 6.5 hours. Your legs protest the moment you stand. They'd gotten comfortable with sitting, developed hope that maybe sitting was the new permanent state, and are now devastated to learn that no, actually, you're going back to the hell of standing motionless for the rest of the afternoon. The stairwell ascent is noticeably slower than the morning's desperate climb. Everyone's tired now, really tired. The kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from 7 hours of physical labour on inadequate food and sleep. The stairs feel steeper, the climb longer, and by the time you reach the 4th floor landing, you're breathing hard and your calves are burning. You're not even halfway through the shift. The afternoon stretches ahead like an endless desert, and you're already running on empty. Back at your loom, the fabric you produced this morning sits on the cloth beam, a visible record of your labour. You've made maybe 45 yards so far. You're slightly behind quota, but not catastrophically so. 75 more yards to go before 7 p.m. That's roughly 12 yards per hour for the remaining shift, which is absolutely achievable if nothing goes wrong. Naturally, things will go wrong, because the universe is malicious and looms are temperamental, but you're trying to maintain optimism for at least the first 10 minutes back from lunch. You engage your loom, and the machinery roars back to life with its familiar aggressive enthusiasm. The shuttle resumes racing, the heddles resume their rhythmic dance, and you resume standing in place watching thread become fabric with the same hypnotic intensity you've maintained since 5:15 this morning. Your feet immediately remind you that they hurt. Your back chimes in to confirm that yes, it also hurts, perhaps even more than your feet. Your hands join the chorus with a tremor that's becoming more pronounced as fatigue sets in. It's a full-body symphony of discomfort, and you're the unwilling conductor. The afternoon light slanting through the windows is different from the morning, warmer, more golden, creating dust beams that highlight exactly how much cotton fibre is floating through the air. The whole room looks like it's filled with glowing particulate matter, which is beautiful in an apocalyptic sort of way, and also deeply concerning from a respiratory health perspective. You can see the dust you're breathing, watch it swirl and dance in the light, understand on a visceral level that all of this is going directly into your lungs where it will remain forever, because the human body has no mechanism for expelling cotton fibres once they're lodged in lung tissue. Your eyes are starting to burn, not a sharp pain, more like a persistent irritation that makes you blink constantly and struggle to focus. It's the cotton dust primarily. The fibres get in your eyes, scratch at your corneas, make everything slightly blurry. but it's also exhaustion, dehydration, and the strain of staring at fast-moving shuttles for hours on end. Your vision is definitely degrading as the shift progresses, becoming slightly unfocused, requiring more effort to maintain the vigilance necessary for catching thread breaks before they become major problems. There's a quirky historical detail about cotton dust and vision that medical historians find grimly fascinating. Many long-time textile workers developed chronic eye infections and scarring from constant fibre exposure. The combination of particulate irritation, poor lighting, and zero safety equipment meant that textile workers often suffered partial vision loss by their 30s, adding to the overall physical devastation the job inflicted. Your burning, watering eyes are the first stage of this progressive damage, but acknowledging that would require confronting the long-term consequences of this work, so you're just going to blink a lot and hope for the best. The 2 p.m. hour is when exhaustion truly settles in, not the fresh tiredness of morning, but the deep grinding fatigue that comes from sustained physical strain without adequate recovery. Your body's running on depleted reserves now, burning through whatever energy the beans and cornbread provided and starting to cannibalize its own resources. Your muscles ache continuously. Your brain feels foggy, thoughts moving through molasses, reaction times slowing in ways that make the dangerous machinery even more dangerous. You catch yourself zoning out, staring at the shuttle without really seeing it, your mind wandering to absolutely anywhere else. You're thinking about sleep. God, you're thinking about sleep with the obsessive intensity of a desert wanderer thinking about water. Your bed, well, your third of a bed, back at the boarding house seems like the most luxurious destination imaginable. You fantasize about lying down, closing your eyes, not moving for 8 consecutive hours. It's an impossible dream, of course. You'll get maybe 5 hours of sleep tonight before the 4:30 a.m. wake-up call, but right now, 5 hours sounds like paradise. A thread breaks. You don't notice for maybe 3 seconds, which is an eternity in loom time. By the time your foggy brain registers the problem, you've got a flaw in the fabric, a gap where the weft thread should be. Damn it. You stop the loom, examine the damage. The gap is maybe 3 inches long, definitely enough to be caught by quality inspection. That's 3 inches of fabric that won't count toward your quota, 3 inches of wasted effort that you'll need to make up elsewhere. You tie the broken thread, restart the loom, and mentally add another 5 minutes to your required productivity to compensate for the flaw. Historians still argue whether afternoon fatigue-related errors in textile factories were a result of unreasonable shift lengths or simply worker carelessness. But from your current position, struggling to focus your burning eyes on your shuttle while your body screams for rest, you're pretty firmly in the unreasonable shift length camp. 14 hours is too long. It's too long for anyone, doing anything, but especially too long for operating dangerous machinery that requires constant attention. The clock shows 2:47 p.m. You've been back from lunch for just over 2 hours, and it feels like a decade. Time has that quality in the afternoon. It stretches and warps, becomes almost elastic. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel like geological epochs. You check the clock obsessively, watching the mind hand make its glacial progress around the face, each tick a small victory and a reminder of how much time remains. Your vision blurs again. You blink hard, trying to clear it, but the blur persists. It's the dust, the exhaustion, maybe the beginning of a migraine from the constant noise and eye strain. You squint at your shuttle, forcing focus, willing your eyes to cooperate for just a few more hours. They grudgingly comply, though the effort required is increasing minute by minute. The afternoon grinds forward. The 3 p.m. hour arrives with no fanfare, just the continued relentless operation of 200 looms and the accumulated suffering of 200 workers all counting down the minutes until release. You're at maybe 60 yards of production now, 60 more to go. The math is simple, but the execution is brutal. Every yard requires approximately 10 minutes of standing, watching, tying broken threads, changing bobbins, fighting exhaustion and pain, and the overwhelming desire to simply collapse where you stand. But you don't collapse. You keep standing. You keep weaving. The shuttle keeps racing. The fabric keeps growing. This is the afternoon fatigue zone, the endless 2 to 6 p.m. stretch where time loses meaning and existence reduces to pure endurance. You're not thriving. You're not okay, but you're still upright and producing fabric, which apparently counts as success in the industrial calculus of 1855 Boston. Only 4 more hours. You can survive 4 more hours. Probably. Maybe. The shuttle bangs back and forth, and you watch it through increasingly blurry vision, pushing forward because stopping isn't an option, and the only way out is through. A small child darts beneath your loom, moving with the kind of reckless speed that only an 8-year-old can manage when they're scared and in a hurry. She's a doffer, one of the children employed to scurry around the factory floor replacing empty bobbins with full ones, collecting the depleted ones for refilling. Her name might be Mary or Margaret or something equally common that you've never bothered to learn, because child workers cycle through this place so fast that learning names feels pointless. She can't be more than 4 feet tall, wearing a shapeless brown dress that's too big for her frame, hair tied back in a messy bun, face smudged with cotton dust and machine oil. The doffers work underneath the machinery, literally crawling beneath the looms while they're running, squeezing into spaces that adult bodies can't access, replacing bobbins at frame level where the shuttle mechanisms operate. It's phenomenally dangerous work. Those looms don't stop moving just because a child is underneath them, and the clearance between machinery and floor is maybe 18 inches at best. Get your hand caught, get your hair snagged in a drive belt, slip and hit your head on an iron frame. All of these are entirely possible and regularly happening disasters. The girl emerges from beneath your loom with a small basket of empty bobbins, headed toward the next machine in line. She's breathing hard, moving fast because doffers are on their own brutal productivity quotas. Replace X number of bobbins per hour or face consequences that probably include physical discipline and definitely include lost wages. The children earn maybe 75 cents per week, less than a third of your already insulting $2.50. Their labour is considered unskilled, expendable, a stepping stone to real factory work like spinning or weaving. Never mind that their small bodies are being permanently damaged by malnutrition and industrial exposure during critical growth years. You watch her disappear under the next loom, a tiny figure swallowed by machinery, and feel a complicated mix of pity and relief. Pity because she's a literal child doing dangerous work for pocket change. Relief because at least you're not her, at least your job keeps you above the machinery rather than beneath it. The moral calculus of poverty is ugly. Everyone's suffering is measured relatively, and you're grateful for anyone who has it worse because it means you're not at the absolute bottom of the hierarchy. There's a quirky historical detail about child labour in 1850s textile factories that doesn't make it into the progress narratives. Many mills specifically recruited children from orphanages and poorhouses, offering them vocational training that was really just cheap labour with a benevolent-sounding name. The children had no choice in the matter. They were essentially conscripted by institutions that received payment for supplying young workers. It was child trafficking with paperwork, legal and normalised and absolutely horrific. Across the room, you can see the male weavers at their looms. There are maybe 15 men total on this floor, operating the more complex machines that produce patterned fabrics, rather than simple sheeting. The men earn $7-8 per week, triple your wages for work that's arguably more skilled but definitely not 3 times more difficult. The pay disparity is justified through elaborate reasoning about men being breadwinners, about male workers needing to support families, about the natural order of gender and compensation. Never mind that you're also supporting a family. Your wages go back to your struggling parents every month. Apparently your family's economic needs are worth less than a man's. The male weavers occupy a different social space than you do. They talk to each other during work hours, often loudly, and Mr. Brennan rarely disciplines them for it. They take breaks to smoke, stepping away from their machines for 5 or 10 minutes without apparent consequences. They're treated as skilled craftsmen deserving of respect, while you and the other women are treated as interchangeable parts in the industrial machine. The hierarchy is maintained through both formal wage structures and informal social dynamics that constantly remind everyone of their place. Historians still argue whether gender-based wage disparities in 19th century factories reflected genuine skill differences or were simply institutional sexism codified into pay scales, but from your current position, earning 2 cents an hour while watching men earn 6 cents for similar work, you're pretty clear on which interpretation fits the evidence. The skill justification is convenient fiction, masking straightforward discrimination. The factory hierarchy extends beyond gender and age. There are ethnic stratifications too, Irish workers at the bottom, earning even less than Yankee farm girls like you. German immigrants somewhere in the middle. Native-born Americans at the relative top of the worker hierarchy, though still far below management and ownership. The pay scales and job assignments reflect these prejudices perfectly. Irish women get the worst jobs in the hottest rooms for the least money. Yankee women get slightly better positions. Men of any ethnicity out-earn all women, and above everyone, the overseers and managers and owners who extract profit from this carefully calibrated suffering. The child offer emerges again, heading back toward the bobbin supply room with her basket of empties. She's coughing, a wet, rattling sound that speaks to developing respiratory problems that will probably kill her before she's 30 if factory accidents don't get her first. Child mortality among factory workers is substantially higher than the general population, but that's just considered the cost of industrial progress. Some children are sacrificed so that others can have cheap cotton sheeting. It's very moral and not at all barbaric. You return your attention to your own loom, to your own survival. The hierarchy exists, it's unjust, it's entrenched, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it from your position at the lower middle tier of industrial exploitation. You're not the child crawling beneath machinery, which is good. You're not the male weaver earning a living wage, which is bad. You're exactly where the factory economy wants you, desperate enough to keep working, comfortable enough relative to those below you that you won't risk rebellion, and angry enough at the injustice that you internalize the pressure to be productive and prove your worth. It's a brilliantly designed system for extracting maximum labor while maintaining control. Everyone's looking down at whoever's beneath them in the hierarchy, grateful to not be that person, rather than looking up at the people actually profiting from everyone's collective exploitation. The child doffers resent nothing because they know nothing else. You resent the wage disparity but appreciate not being a child doffer. The male weavers appreciate their superior wages but resent the overseers, and everyone's too tired and desperate to organize collective resistance. The shuttle continues its race. The hierarchy continues its function. You continue weaving, knowing your place, accepting the injustice because the alternative is unemployment and starvation. This is the pecking order, the social machinery that runs, parallel to the mechanical machinery, both systems working in concert to convert human effort into profit while maintaining order through carefully calibrated inequality. The child doffer disappears again beneath another loom. You weave another yard. The factory grinds forward, consuming workers of all ages and genders, paying them according to arbitrary hierarchies, and calling the whole arrangement natural and inevitable and just the way things are. By 6 p.m. your body has transcended normal pain and entered a realm of suffering that feels almost transcendent. Your feet aren't just hurting anymore, they've gone partially numb, that strange combination of stabbing pain and complete loss of sensation that suggests nerve damage is actively occurring. Your back has progressed from aching to spasming irregularly, sending shooting pains up your spine that make you gasp and grab the loom frame for support. Your hands are the worst, though. They're shaking continuously now, the tremor so pronounced that you can see your fingers vibrating even when you try to hold them still. And they're bleeding. Not dramatically. No arterial spray or anything that would justify stopping work, but persistently. Small cuts from sharp thread ends have opened and reopened throughout the day, and the combination of cotton dust, machine oil, and constant friction has prevented any healing. Your fingertips are raw, several actually bleeding enough that you've left small blood smears on the thread you're handling. Those blood spots will become permanent marks in the fabric, flaws that quality control will reject, yards that won't count toward your quota. You're literally bleeding into your work and still falling behind. The math is getting desperate. You check your production count during a bobbin change. 98 yards completed, 22 yards to go, 1 hour remaining. That's 22 yards in 60 minutes, which breaks down to roughly 1 yard every 2.7 minutes. Under normal circumstances, that's achievable. But circumstances stopped being normal approximately 8 hours ago, and now you're operating on fumes and determination, and the cold terror of what happens if you fall short. Fall short by a few yards, and you lose proportional wages, maybe 20 or 30 cents off your weekly pay. Fall short by significant amounts, and you have a conversation with Mr. Brennan about your future at this factory. Fall short repeatedly, and you're replaced by one of the 40 women currently desperate for employment. The consequences aren't theoretical. You've watched it happen to others. The factory is ruthless about maintaining productivity standards, and workers who can't keep pace are discarded without ceremony or compensation. Your muscles are cramping now, not occasionally but continuously. Your calves seize up every few minutes, forcing you to shift weight and stretch as subtly as possible while maintaining the appearance of focused productivity. Your shoulders are locked in permanent tension, creating knots that radiate pain down your arms. Your neck is frozen in position from staring at the shuttle for 13 hours, and when you try to turn your head, you hear concerning cracking sounds that probably indicate something structural is wrong with your cervical vertebrae. But you keep weaving. What else are you going to do? Stop? Surrender? Accept defeat and financial ruin? Those aren't options. You grit. Teeth. Literally, your jaw is clenched so tight it's giving you a headache, and push through the pain, the exhaustion, the physical breakdown. The shuttle races back and forth. The fabric grows. 99 yards, 100 yards, 20 more to go. There's a quirky historical detail about end-of-shift productivity that labour historians find fascinating. Many factories in the 1850s saw their highest rates of workplace accidents in the final hour of shifts, when exhausted workers made desperate pushes to meet quotas. The combination of fatigue, reduced cognitive function, and increased risk-taking created perfect conditions for injuries. You're currently embodying this statistic, taking shortcuts and reaching across moving machinery in ways you'd never attempt during morning hours, all in service of hitting that magic 120-yard number. Your vision is seriously degraded now. The cotton dust, eye strain, and exhaustion have combined to make everything slightly blurry, edges soft, details hard to discern. You're weaving more by feel and sound than by sight, listening for the rhythm changes that indicate problems, relying on muscle memory to guide your hands. It's dangerous. You could easily miss a critical issue, but slowing down to peer carefully at everything would mean falling further behind, so you're gambling that nothing catastrophic happens in the next hour. Thread breaks are multiplying as both the warp threads and your attention span deteriorate. You've had maybe 15 breaks in the last hour alone, each one requiring precious seconds to locate and repair. Your fingers are so damaged and shaky that tying knots takes longer than it should, and you've botched several ties, requiring do-overs that consume even more time. The math keeps getting worse. Every 30-second delay is another 8 inches of fabric you're behind schedule, another fraction of a cent subtracted from your desperately needed wages. 105 yards, 15 to go, 45 minutes remaining. The ratio is improving, you're actually ahead of the pace you need now. But you don't trust it. Something will go wrong. Something always goes wrong. A thread will break at exactly the wrong moment, or your loom will develop a mechanical problem, or Mr. Brennan will materialise and find some violation worth docking time for. You can't relax, can't ease up, can't assume success until the final bell rings and your fabric is measured and counted. Historians still argue whether piece rate quota systems in textile factories were designed to extract maximum possible labour or simply reflected reasonable productivity expectations, but from your current position, bleeding, cramping, barely able to see straight while desperately trying to hit an arbitrary number that determines whether you eat adequately this week, you're extremely clear on which interpretation matches reality. The quotas are calibrated to require everything you have plus a little more, ensuring that workers are perpetually stretched to their breaking point. Your right hand cramps so severely that you actually cry out, a small choked sound that's lost in the machinery roar. The cramp locks your fingers into a claw position, and for terrifying seconds you can't open your hand to release the thread you're holding. You massage the cramped muscles with your left hand, working the knot loose, forcing your fingers to straighten. The cramp releases, leaving behind a deep ache that suggests you've actually damaged something. But your hand still functions mostly, so you return to work. 110 yards, 10 more to go, 30 minutes left. You're going to make it. Probably. Maybe. If nothing catastrophic happens and you maintain this unsustainable pace for just 30 more minutes, you'll hit quota, earn your full wages, survive another week. The finish line is visible, and you push toward it with the desperation of someone who understands exactly what's at stake. Around you, other women are in similar states of controlled crisis. Everyone's moving faster than is safe. Everyone's taking risks. Everyone's gambling their physical safety against economic necessity. The factory in the final hour is a pressure cooker of desperate productivity. 200 workers simultaneously pushing their bodies past reasonable limits in service of quotas that were specifically designed to require this level of suffering. The shuttle bangs back and forth, your fabric grows. 115 yards, 118. Your bleeding fingers leave marks on the thread. Your cramping muscles scream protests. Your blurry vision struggles to track the shuttle's race. But you keep going, keep pushing, because stopping means failure, and failure means consequences you can't afford. Almost there. Just a few more yards, just a few more minutes. You can collapse after the bell rings. You can tend your wounds and rest your muscles and close your burning eyes after you've secured your wages. But right now, in this final desperate push, you have to keep moving, keep weaving, keep bleeding into fabric that will be sold to people who will never know the cost of its production. The quota panic is real, and you're living it. One painful yard at a time. The 7 p.m. bell cuts through the factory roar like salvation itself, and the sound triggers a physical response so profound you nearly collapse from relief. Your entire body sags, shoulders dropping, knees weakening. The rigid tension you've maintained for 13 hours and 45 minutes releasing all at once like a cut bowstring. The bell continues ringing, that beautiful aggressive clanging that normally signals oppression, but right now sounds like freedom, like mercy, like the single best noise you've ever heard in your entire life. You don't immediately shut down your loom because you need to verify your final count first. This is critical. Mr. Brennan or one of his assistants will measure your days, production, and every yard matters. You lean over the cloth beam, trying to focus your degraded vision on the fabric markers, counting yards with fingers that can barely feel anything anymore. 119 yards, 120, 121 actually. You've exceeded quota by a single yard, which feels like winning a lottery and probably means absolutely nothing in terms of actual reward, but represents a moral victory over the system that's been grinding you down all day. You disengage the loom with a hand that's shaking so badly you need 2 tries to grab the lever. The machinery shudders to a halt, and the sudden silence, well, relative silence, because 199 other looms are still winding down, is almost disorienting. Your loom is quiet. Your section of the industrial symphony has concluded. You're done. Actually done. The realization hits with delayed impact, and you have to grab the loom frame to steady yourself because the relief is so intense it's almost nauseating. Around you, 200 women are executing the same shutdown ritual with varying degrees of coordination. Some are moving efficiently, muscle memory guiding them through the procedure even in their exhausted state. Others are fumbling, dropping tools, struggling with simple tasks because their bodies have completely given out. One woman 2 rows over is openly crying. Not sad tears, just the emotional release of finally being allowed to stop performing, stop pushing, stop pretending she's fine when she's categorically not fine. The factory floor is transforming from ordered industrial space to controlled chaos. Women are collecting personal items, shawls, empty lunch pails, the few possessions they're allowed to keep at their stations. Some are stretching, finally permitting their bodies to move in ways other than the rigid standing position. Others are already shuffling toward the stairwells, desperate to escape before the evening shift workers arrive and create traffic jams in the narrow passages. You attempt to walk and discover that your legs have forgotten how, not metaphorically, literally forgotten. They've been locked in standing position for so long that the mechanics of ambulation feel foreign and difficult. Your first few steps are stumbling, uncertain, like a newborn deer trying to figure out this whole moving concept. Your feet are simultaneously numb and agonizing, sending confused pain signals that make each step an adventure in controlled falling. But you're moving, progressing toward the stairwell, joining the exodus. The descent is treacherous. The stairs that were merely dangerous this morning are actively hazardous now, when everyone's exhausted and rushing and barely coordinated enough to walk flat surfaces, much less navigate stairs. You grip the railing, that same greasy, worn railing, and take it one step at a time, concentrating hard on not tumbling forward and taking out the 6 women ahead of you in a cascade of bodies and injury. Around you, others are making the same careful descent, a slow-motion stampede of people who are desperate to leave but too tired to move quickly. There's a quirky historical detail about end-of-shift exits from textile factories that safety investigators later documented. Many workers developed specific stairwell navigation strategies to avoid injury, including going down backwards, sitting and scooting, or linking arms with others for stability. The factories provided no safety railings beyond basic handholds, no adequate lighting, and no concern for workers' ability to safely navigate while exhausted. Falls were common, injuries frequent, and the factory response was typically to blame worker clumsiness rather than address structural problems. Fourth floor to third, third to second, second to first, first to ground level. Each floor passed feels like a milestone, a measure of progress toward actual freedom. The air gets marginally cooler as you descend, less oppressively humid, though it's still thick with cotton dust that hangs in suspension throughout the building. Your breathing is laboured, partly from exertion, partly from the day's accumulated respiratory assault, partly from the chest-tightening anxiety that won't fully release until you're outside the factory gates. The ground floor is packed with exiting workers from all departments: spinners, weavers, doffers, machine maintenance crews, everyone who's been imprisoned by wages and necessity for the past 12 to 14 hours, all converging on the exits simultaneously. The crowd is dense, moving slowly, everyone too tired for the aggressive pushing that characterized morning entry. You shuffle forward in incremental steps, part of a human current flowing toward the doors. The overseer at the exit is checking faces, making sure no one's stealing anything, maintaining the fiction of security while mostly just creating one final bottleneck between workers and freedom. You pass his inspection without incident. Your face is familiar after 8 months, and your empty hands present no theft concerns. He waves you through without acknowledgement, already focused on the next person in line, and then you're outside. Actually outside. The early December evening air hits you like a blessing, cold and clean and absolutely glorious after 14 hours of heated, dust-filled factory atmosphere. It's not quite dark yet. There's still a faint glow on the western horizon, that peculiar winter twilight that's more grey than any recognisable colour. The temperature has dropped significantly since this morning, probably down to the mid-30s, and the cold should be uncomfortable, but instead feels absolutely perfect against your overheated skin. Historians still argue whether the physiological shock of transitioning from 90-degree factory air to freezing outdoor temperatures contributed to the high rates of respiratory illness among mill workers. But right now, breathing cold air that doesn't taste like cotton, you genuinely don't care about long-term health consequences. You're out. You're free for the next 9.5 hours until you have to return and do this all again. The courtyard is filling with exiting workers, everyone moving slowly toward the gates, stumbling through twilight like survivors of some industrial battle. The gas lamps are being lit along the streets, creating those familiar pools of yellow light in the gathering darkness. You join the flow of humanity heading back toward the boarding house district, too tired to talk, too relieved to care about the cold, just moving forward, because forward is the only direction available. The factory bell rings one more time, the night shift summons, calling in the workers who will maintain production through the dark hours. You watch them stream past, fresh faces showing the anxiety and resignation of people about to begin what you've just finished. Some are younger than you, first day new, eyes wide with apprehension. Others are veterans, faces already showing the wear of years spent feeding the industrial machine. You don't envy them. You're done for today. Your body's destroyed, your hands are bleeding, your vision is blurry, and your muscles are screaming, but you're done. The liberation bell has rung, and you're stumbling toward your boarding house bed with the desperate, single-minded focus of someone who has earned rest through 13 hours and 45 minutes of suffering. The twilight deepens. Your shuffling steps carry you forward. Behind you, the factory continues its operation, machinery roaring through the night shift, the industrial beast that never sleeps consuming a fresh batch of workers while you make your escape into the winter darkness. The pay window is in the factory office, a small brick building adjacent to the main mill that houses the administrative functions you rarely see and never interact with. On Saturdays, and yes, today is Saturday, the 6th consecutive day of work this week, with only tomorrow's blessed Sunday rest ahead, the pay window opens at 7:30 p.m, half an hour after shift end. This timing is deliberate. It keeps workers on factory grounds longer, maintains control, and ensures that anyone who might be tempted to skip out early knows they won't get paid until they've completed their full shift. You join the line forming outside the pay window, a queue of maybe 60 women from your floor alone, all waiting to collect the wages they've bled for over the past 6 days. The line moves slowly because each transaction requires verification, signature or mark in the ledger, and the careful counting of coins. The clerk handling payouts is a thin man in his 40s, Mr. Wesley, who's worked this position for years and has perfected the art of handing over money while conveying maximum contempt for the people receiving it. The cold is seeping through your inadequate clothing now that you're standing. Still, your body had generated enough heat during the walk from the factory floor to stay warm, but motionless waiting in 30-degree temperatures is a different situation entirely. You're shivering, arms wrapped around yourself, shifting from foot to foot in a futile attempt to generate warmth. The woman ahead of you, Catherine something, works 2 looms down, is coughing continuously. That wet, rattling sound that suggests her factory cough has progressed into something more serious. Probably bronchitis, possibly pneumonia. She'll work through it because taking sick days means lost wages, and lost wages means eviction and starvation. The line inches forward. You can see the pay window now, a small opening in the brick wall with bars across it like you're collecting wages from a bank or a prison. The symbolism isn't subtle. Mr. Wesley sits behind a desk stacked with ledgers and small cloth bags of coins, a gas lamp illuminating his workspace, his face set in an expression of permanent bureaucratic displeasure. You're maybe 10 people back when you hear the first dispute. A woman at the window, young Irish accent probably new, is protesting her wages. "But I worked every day this week, sir, full shifts, I don't understand why." Mr. Wesley cuts her off with the weary tone of someone who has this conversation 16 times per payday and finds it tedious every time. Fines for thread breaks, quality control rejections, and a quarter day docked for tardiness Wednesday morning. It's all documented. Next. The woman starts to argue, and one of the overseers, who's been lurking near the pay window, maintaining order, preventing worker uprising over wage theft, steps forward with a look that says, "Move along or face consequences." The woman takes her reduced wages, probably $180 instead of the expected $250, and leaves, crying quietly. The line shuffles forward. No one comments on what just happened because commenting would be pointless and potentially dangerous. There's a quirky historical detail about factory paydays that labour historians find grimly fascinating. Many mills in the 1850s maintained elaborate fine systems that were documented in ledgers, but rarely explained to workers in advance. You could work a full week believing you'd earned $2.50 only to discover on payday that various infractions, some real, some invented, had reduced your wages to $2 or less. The system was technically legal, contractually sound, and absolutely designed to extract maximum labour while minimising actual compensation. You're fifth in line now, close enough to hear the clink of coins as Mr. Wesley counts out wages. The woman ahead of you receives her pay without incident, full $2.50, handed over in a small cloth bag with her name marked on it. She signs the ledger with an X, illiteracy being common enough that signatures aren't required, just some mark indicating you've received payment. She takes her bag and leaves quickly, clutching it like someone might try to steal it, which isn't paranoia because wage theft by fellow workers is rare but not unheard of when everyone's desperate. Fourth in line, third, second. You're calculating your expected wages, running through the week's events looking for potential fine triggers. You were on time every day, no tardiness fines. Your thread break rate was higher than ideal but not catastrophic. Maybe a small deduction there. Quality control rejected maybe 10 yards of your fabric across the whole week for various floors. That's roughly 20 cents lost. So you're expecting maybe $2.30, possibly $2.40 if Mr. Wesley is feeling generous, which he never is. First in line. You step up to the window, and Mr. Wesley glances at you with the level of interest one might show a piece of furniture. Name? You provide it. He consults his ledger, running his finger down columns of names and numbers, lips moving slightly as he calculates. His finger stops at your entry. Thread breaks, quality rejections, 10 yards below quota Thursday. That last one hits you like a punch. You thought you'd made quota Thursday, but apparently the measurement disagreed. Total deductions, 40 cents, wages, $2.10. $2.10. 40 cents deducted from your expected $2.50. That's 16% of your wages gone for infractions that may or may not be accurately documented, but which you have absolutely no power to dispute. You open your mouth to question the Thursday quota claim, then close it again because you've seen how those disputes end. Mr. Wesley's already counting out your coins, $2 coins and dime, the clink of metal on metal as he drops them into a small cloth bag, and sliding it across the counter toward you. "Sign here." He indicates a line in the ledger next to your name. You make your mark, a rough X because you can read basic words but writing is another matter entirely, and take your bag. The coins are heavy, real, valuable. $2.10 is still money, still wages, still more than you'd earn doing anything else available to you. But it's also substantially less than what you bled for this week, and the injustice burns even as you clutch the bag and move away from the window. Historians still argue whether factory wage systems represented fair compensation for labour or systemic exploitation, but from your current position, holding $2.10 that represents 72 hours of brutal physical labour, while watching 40 cents vanish into the ledger of fines and deductions, you're extremely clear on where you stand in that debate. The next woman steps up to the window. You drift away from the line, tucking your wage bag into the pocket of your dress where it sits heavy against your hip. $2.10, minus $1.25 for boarding house rent, minus roughly 50 cents for food beyond what the boarding house provides, minus 10 cents for laundry. That leaves 25 cents for everything else: clothing repairs, personal items, savings for emergencies that will inevitably come, and the money you send home to your family every month. 25 cents of discretionary income from a week of destroying your body in a textile factory. The math is depressing but familiar. You've been living this calculation for 8 months, watching your small savings grow incrementally while your health deteriorates exponentially. The economics of mill work don't favour the worker. They never have. They never will. But they're marginally better than the complete absence of cash income that drove you here from the farm. You walk away from the factory, wage bag secure in your pocket, joining the stream of other workers heading toward their various boarding houses and tenements. The Saturday evening streets are busier than weekday evenings. People have money, shops are open late. There's a sense of temporary freedom before Sunday's rest day. You walk past a bakery where fresh bread costs more than you can justify spending. Past a tavern where workers are already drinking away their wages. Past a street preacher warning about the moral dangers of city life while standing 20 feet from a factory that's actively destroying bodies and souls 6 days a week. The coins clink gently in your pocket with each step. $2.10. Your weekly compensation for becoming progressively deaf, developing permanent lung damage, sacrificing your youth and health, and any possibility of a better future. It's not enough. It will never be enough, but it's what you get, and you take it, because the alternative is worse. Payday. The weekly ritual of receiving inadequate compensation for excessive suffering. At least it's Saturday. At least tomorrow you can rest. At least you have coins in your pocket instead of empty promises. The relief is real, even if the wages aren't fair. You shuffle toward your boarding house through the winter twilight, exhausted and underpaid but temporarily solvent, which is apparently the best you can hope for in 1855 Boston. Mrs. Donnelly's boarding house materializes through the darkness, like a lighthouse guiding shipwreck survivors to shore. It's a narrow 3-story brick building squeezed between 2 similar structures, all of them converted from single-family townhouses into worker housing when the textile boom created demand for cheap lodging near the mills. The windows glow with lamplight, and you can smell dinner cooking. Some kind of meat stew, probably, which is the Saturday special because Mrs. Donnelly knows that payday makes workers marginally less likely to complain about food quality. You climb the front steps with legs that are threatening to give out entirely. The door opens into a narrow hallway that's overheated from the kitchen and smells like boiled cabbage, unwashed bodies, and the particular mustiness that comes from 43 women living in spaces designed for 12. The hallway is crowded with other mill girls returning from various shifts and factories, all of us executing the same exhausted shuffle toward warmth and food and the promise of eventual horizontal rest. The dining room is loud and chaotic, packed with women at 2 long tables, passing bowls and plates, talking over each other in the aggressive way people do when they only have 30 minutes to eat and socialise before mandatory bedtime. Mrs. Donnelly runs a strict house. Dinner at 8 p.m, lights out at 9 p.m, absolute silence after 9:30. The rules are posted on the wall and enforced with the threat of eviction, which is enough to keep even the most rebellious mill girls compliant. You claim a spot at the second table, squeezing onto the bench between 2 women you vaguely recognise but don't really know. The boarding house has high turnover. Girls arrive, stay 3 months or 2 years, then leave for marriage or illness or just giving up on factory life. You've stopped learning names of new arrivals because they rarely last long enough to make friendship worthwhile. It's a transient existence, everyone passing through on their way to somewhere else or nowhere at all. The dinner is exactly what you expected. Beef stew with vegetables that are probably more potato than anything else, served in chipped ceramic bowls with questionable cleanliness. There's bread too, yesterday's bread, slightly stale, but still bread. It's substantially better than the beans and cornbread you ate at the factory, which isn't saying much but counts as a win. You eat mechanically, spooning stew into your mouth without really tasting it, just consuming calories because your body needs fuel and this is what's available. Around you, conversations are happening in fragments. Someone's talking about a letter from home. Another girl is complaining about her overseer. Two women at the far end are gossiping about a third woman who apparently has a suitor and might be leaving for marriage soon, which triggers a mix of congratulations and envy from the group. Marriage is the exit strategy everyone dreams about. Find a man with decent wages, escape the factory, transition from wage earner to homemaker. Whether that's actually better is debatable, but it's different, and different sounds like salvation when you're destroying your body 14 hours a day. There's a quirky historical detail about boarding house culture that social historians find fascinating. Many mill-girl boarding houses in the 1850s functioned as informal networks for job hunting, marriage prospects, and mutual aid. Women shared information about which factories had openable positions, which overseers were particularly brutal, which men in the area were decent marriage prospects versus dangerous to avoid. The boarding house was simultaneously a site of oppression, overcrowded, overregulated, overpriced, and a space of female solidarity where workers built relationships and survival strategies. You're too tired for conversation. The woman to your left tries to engage you, something about Sunday plans maybe, but you can barely process the words, much less formulate a response. You make some non-committal sound and return your attention to your stew, hoping she'll interpret your silence as disinterest rather than complete cognitive shutdown. She does, turning to talk to someone else, and you're left alone with your bowl and your exhaustion. Your hands are still shaking as you hold the spoon, that persistent tremor that's gotten worse throughout the day. The cuts on your fingers have stopped bleeding, but they sting when they contact the warm stew. Your body is cataloguing its damage systematically, feet swollen and aching, back locked in spasm, shoulders knotted with tension, head pounding from noise exposure and eye strain. You're 23 years old and you feel 60, which is probably accurate in terms of cumulative physical wear. The stew is gone in maybe 8 minutes. You didn't even taste most of it, just shoveled it in, swallowed, repeated. The bread follows, equally unmemorable. Around you, other women are finishing their meals too, the dining room gradually quieting as exhaustion wins over sociability. Some girls are already leaving the table, heading upstairs to prepare for bed even though it's only 8:25, and lights out isn't for another half hour. Sleep is precious, and any extra minutes are worth claiming. Mrs. Donnelly appears in the doorway, surveying her domain with the practiced eye of someone who's managed working women for 20 years. She's maybe 50, grey hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a dark dress that's probably never been fashionable but exudes authority. Dishes in the basin, girls, and remember, 9 o'clock lights, 9:30 silence, church tomorrow at 8 for those attending. Her tone makes it clear that those attending should be everyone, though she can't actually force mill girls to church on their one day off. You stand, wobbling slightly as your legs protest the transition from sitting to standing, and carry your bowl, and spoon to the washing basin. The water is already grey and greasy from previous dishes, but you rinse your bowl anyway, going through the motions because Mrs. Donnelly watches and notes which girls maintain standards and which don't. The bowl joins a stack of other bowls. The spoon goes in a jar with other spoons. The whole system is communal and vaguely unsanitary, and absolutely standard for working-class boarding houses. The stairs to your third-floor room feel like Mount Everest. You climb slowly, gripping the railing, hauling yourself upward while your legs threaten mutiny. Other women are making the same ascent, everyone moving at the pace of people who've exceeded their physical limits approximately 8 hours ago and are now running on pure stubbornness. Your room is exactly as you left it this morning. Cramped, cold, depressing. The shared bed dominates the space, already occupied by Mary, who must have gotten off shift earlier and is currently sound asleep, snoring softly. Sarah isn't back yet. She works a different factory with slightly later hours. You navigate the narrow space between bed and trunk, starting the process of preparing for bed. Undressing is complicated when your fingers don't work properly. You fumble with buttons, struggle with laces, eventually manage to remove your work dress and underlinen. The dress is filthy, stained with sweat, blood, machine oil and cotton dust. It needs washing desperately, but laundry is tomorrow's problem. Tonight, you just drape it over your trunk and hope it airs out enough to be wearable Monday morning. Your nightgown is thin cotton, worn soft from repeated washing, and it's absolutely insufficient for the room's temperature. But it's what you have, so you pull it on, shivering immediately as the cold fabric touches your overheated skin. Your hair is still pinned up from work. You release the pins, letting your hair fall down in a tangled mass that probably hasn't been properly washed in 2 weeks. Brushing it would be ideal. You lack the energy. It can be tomorrow's problem too. The bed beckons. Mary is occupying the middle section, which means you're relegated to the left edge, where you'll spend the night fighting to maintain a few inches of mattress space. You climb in carefully, trying not to wake her, and the straw mattress crackles and shifts under your weight. The quilt is already covering Mary, so you burrow under it, curling on your side in the space available, feeling the cold spots where the quilt doesn't quite reach. Historians still argue whether boarding house accommodations in 19th century mill towns represented reasonable housing given economic constraints, or exploitative profiteering that prioritized owner income over worker dignity. But from your current position, sharing a bed with 2 other adults, freezing, too exhausted to even feel the discomfort properly, you're extremely clear on which interpretation fits the evidence. You close your eyes, your body is screaming with accumulated pain and fatigue. Tomorrow is Sunday, rest day, church day, laundry day, the 1 day per week you're not factory property. But even that relief is tinged with dread because Sunday ends, Monday arrives, and at 4:30 a.m. you'll wake up and do this entire horrific routine again. 6 more days of standing and weaving and bleeding into fabric. 6 more days of noise and heat and cotton dust. 6 more days of destroying your body for $2.10 per week. The room is dark now. Someone downstairs has extinguished the hallway lamp, and the only light is the faint glow from street lamps filtering through the window. Mary's breathing provides a rhythm, steady and soft. Somewhere in the building you can hear other women moving, preparing for bed, settling in for precious hours of unconsciousness. You drift towards sleep, your last conscious thought a simple calculation. 9.5 hours until you have to wake up and start this all over again. Not enough rest, never enough rest. But it's what you get, and you take it, because the alternative is staying awake, and staying awake means fully processing the reality of your existence, and that way lies madness. The boarding house settles into nighttime quiet. Your exhausted body begins its inadequate recovery process. Tomorrow you'll wake, and Monday you'll return to the factory, and the cycle will continue until your body breaks completely, or you find some escape route that currently seems impossibly distant. For now, though, you sleep. Merciful, temporary unconsciousness. The only freedom a mill girl gets. Sleep doesn't come immediately, despite your body's desperate need for it. You lie there in the darkness, sharing warmth with Mary's unconscious form, listening to the sounds of the boarding house settling into night. Footsteps on the floor above, the creak of bed frames, someone coughing in another room, that same wet, rattling cough that half the building shares, the factory's signature respiratory gift that keeps on giving. The sounds are familiar, almost comforting in their predictability. This is your life now. This is what passes for home. Through the thin walls, you can hear Mrs. Donnelly making her final rounds, checking that lights are out and rules are followed. Her footsteps are distinctive, heavy, purposeful, the tread of authority. She pauses outside your door briefly, presumably confirming darkness and silence, then continues down the hall. The whole house is under surveillance, even in sleep, because respectability and moral oversight don't pause for unconsciousness. The mill girls must be monitored, protected from themselves and vice, kept on the straight and narrow path that leads from factory to church and back again. Your muscles are twitching as they begin to relax, sending involuntary spasms through your legs and back. It's unsettling but normal. Your body releasing the tension it's held for 14 hours, nerves misfiring as they transition from extreme stress to rest. Your feet throb with each heartbeat, the increased blood flow to damaged tissue, creating waves of discomfort that make you want to kick and stretch. But movement would disturb Mary, so you lie still and endure the sensation, knowing it will pass eventually as your body recalibrates to horizontal existence. Outside, the city continues its nighttime operations. You can hear the distant sounds of Boston after dark, cartwheels on cobblestones, voices from the street, the occasional bark of a dog, and underneath everything, constant and pervasive, the sound of factory whistles from across the textile district. The night shift is beginning at dozens of mills simultaneously, each whistle calling workers to their stations, maintaining the 24-hour production cycle that defines industrial capitalism. The factories never truly sleep. They just swap out exhausted workers for slightly less exhausted ones, rotating human fuel through the mechanical furnace. That sound, those whistles, represent something profound and horrible. Right now, at this exact moment, hundreds of other women are climbing stairs to weaving rooms, engaging looms, beginning the same brutal routine you just finished. They'll stand through the night while you sleep. They'll weave fabric in darkness while you rest. And when they're released at 7 a.m., you'll be waking to start your day shift. It's a relay race of suffering, workers handing off the baton of exploitation to each other in endless succession, the factory grinding forward without pause. There's something deeply disturbing about the realization that your rest is only possible because other bodies are currently being consumed in your place. The system requires constant feeding. It cannot pause for human limitations like the need for sleep. So it divides workers into shifts, staggers schedules, ensures that at every moment of every day, someone is standing at a loom, breathing cotton dust, bleeding into fabric. You're complicit in this system simply by participating, simply by needing the wages it provides, simply by existing within the economic structure that demands your body as payment for survival. Sarah arrives, stumbling into the room with the graceless exhaustion of someone who's also worked a full shift. She mumbles something that might be a greeting, might be a curse, then begins the fumbling process of undressing in darkness. You hear her struggle with buttons, the soft impact of her dress hitting the trunk, the creak of the bed frame as she climbs in on the right side. The mattress shifts, the quilt redistributes, and now you're truly packed in. 3 adult women sharing a bed designed for 1, maybe 1.5 if people are friendly. The warmth helps, though. 3 bodies generate more heat than 1, and the February cold is less penetrating when you're pressed against other people. It's intimate in an uncomfortable way. You can feel Sarah's breathing, Mary's occasional shifts, the rise and fall of their bodies as they sleep. Privacy is a luxury that poverty eliminates. You share beds, share rooms, share air and space, and the basic functions of existence, because individual accommodation costs money that none of you have. Your thoughts are beginning to fragment, consciousness giving way to the pull of sleep. The day's events replay in disjointed flashes. The morning climb up dark stairs, the shuttle's endless race, Emma's crushed fingers, the desperate quota push, Mr. Wesley counting out your inadequate wages. The memories blur together, lose coherence, become dream-adjacent as your brain starts shutting down non-essential functions. You're aware of your breathing slowing, deepening. Your heartbeat is settling into its resting rhythm. The pain in your feet and back is receding slightly, not gone but distant, as if happening to someone else's body. Sleep is pulling you under like a tide, gentle and irresistible, offering temporary escape from the physical prison of factory work. The factory whistles sound again, a different pitch, a different mill, another shift beginning. But the sound is farther away now, filtered through the approaching unconsciousness, becoming part of the nighttime soundscape rather than a clarion call to action. You're sinking deeper, the boundary between waking and sleeping dissolving, thoughts becoming incoherent, consciousness fragmenting into the scattered imagery that precedes actual sleep. Your last semi-coherent thought is a simple acknowledgement: you survived today. That's the bar for success in this life. Not thriving, not happiness, not fulfillment, just survival. You made it through another 14-hour shift without serious injury. You earned wages, however inadequate. You have a bed, however crowded. You're alive, however damaged. Tomorrow is Sunday, rest day, a brief reprieve before the cycle resumes. But that's tomorrow's concern. Tonight, you sleep. And now, as the darkness deepens around you, and the boarding house settles into the profound quiet of night, let yourself drift further into rest. The factory whistles are fading into the distance, becoming part of the city's nighttime lullaby rather than a summons to labour. Your body, so tested and strained throughout this long day, is finally allowed to release its tension completely. Every muscle softens, every ache begins its slow journey toward healing, even if that healing is never quite complete before you must rise again. The weight of the quilt becomes a comfort, the warmth of the shared bed a cocoon against the February cold. Outside, Boston sleeps and wakes in shifts, the rhythm of industry continuing its relentless beat. But you are apart from it now, suspended in the blessed space between days where nothing is required of you except to breathe, to rest, to let unconsciousness carry you away from the hard edges of your waking life. Tomorrow the church bells will ring gentler than factory bells, calling you to Sunday services, where you can sit on hard wooden pews and find a different kind of rest. But even that is far away, beyond the horizon of this deep night. For now there is only darkness, warmth, the soft breathing of those who share your bed, and the gradual dissolution of conscious thought into dreams. The factory whistles sound one last time, distant now, almost musical, and then they too fade into the background of sleep. Your breathing matches the rhythm of the women beside you, 3 hearts beating in proximity, 3 lives intertwined by circumstance and necessity, 3 souls finding what peace they can in shared space and shared exhaustion. Let the weight of the day fall away. Let the soreness in your muscles become abstract, distant. Let your mind release its grip on all the calculations and worries and fears that have filled your waking hours. There is nothing more required of you tonight. You have done enough. You have survived, and in surviving you have earned this rest, however brief, however insufficient it may be. The darkness is complete now. The boarding house is silent. Even the city outside has quieted to a murmur, and you, wrapped in worn cotton and shared warmth, drift deeper into sleep's embrace, where there are no looms, no overseers, no quotas to meet, only peace, only rest, only the merciful unconsciousness that receives you now and holds you gently until morning comes again. Sleep well, you've earned it.